I'm going to beat you into the living death.
All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Thinker St. James. I am joined tonight by my good friend Chase Parton, and it brings me great joy to say that we are here tonight to talk about the 2002 documentary, The Smashing Machine. Chase, how are you, sir?
Dude, I'm awesome. This is going to be a really good time to talk about it. Is it was a great time. I'll let you set it up a little bit, but there's a lot of things that I really want to talk about. It's more interesting than, I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on in this, but a lot of different things go on, and it's just a really fun experience. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the thing about this film specifically is like not only what it like did for mixed martial arts in general, but like looking at it now through the lens of current times, looking back at it as almost like a time capsule of the era to an extent, because a lot of things that you see in here, like at the time that this came out in 2002, like this would have been a wide scale exposure to mixed martial arts, the likes of which had not happened prior.
mhm.
So a lot of people, I mean, there potentially were a lot of people that this could have been legitimately the first time that they'd ever seen anything like this, like fighting in this style, the type of brutality that you see in this film, because this is old school MMA. There's a lot of stuff that you don't see anymore that happens in this film. Just the nature of this unknown beast, so to speak, being presented to people might have been shocking to a lot of people, and definitely like never seen before. So I think that as a historical piece, it is very important. In fact, to me, it might be one of the most important pieces of MMA media ever produced.
I want to say that we probably should have done some research on like the numbers that this had done, like when it came out, because I think the complete opposite. I don't think many people would have been exposed to this at all. Like, I don't think this would have been a major hit. Like, who's clicking to go see this other than people who know who Mark Kerr is at the time? I had been. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, see, I was going to say, well, this is the interesting thing, Chase. I know that as this is also why it's interesting to talk to you about it, and
Hmm.
me being a little bit older than you. Of course, this aired on HBO, so
Okay.
no one had to click anything except for their remote control, because this was back when television channels just aired.
That was a premium package, though, wasn't it?
Well,
You
but
had to
everybody
pay.
had HBO though. I mean, like HBO was pretty. I mean, not maybe not
I didn't grow
everybody,
up
but
with HBO. Everybody at
a
home. Let
lot
me
of
tell you
people had
this.
HBO.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it like if you were going to have the like one step above your standard cable, like you'd have HBO as that next level. So it was
Gotcha.
pretty common, I would say. Now, I'm not saying that everybody even saw this who had HBO.
Right.
I'm just saying that you have to think about the fact that MMA was so underground. This was back in an era where if like you wanted to watch like the UFC, 9 times out of 10, you weren't even seeing it on the pay-per-views. You were seeing it on VHS tapes. And a lot of times that was VHS tapes that were copied, bootlegged, recirculated. You had to go into the back room of the video store back when there were video stores. I mean, this is it's so crazy to think to me now, because like, I in my own mind don't think that I'm like an old man, but the world has changed significantly since when I was a young boy, and to where I am now. And like these things like video stores, VHS tapes and stuff, like it's so different now. But this like the way that things were in order to see this sport were a lot different. So like just to have a piece of it out in the public in this way was very unique at the time.
I think the way that I viewed this, and I think this was a fun way to experience, is like it was more like a found footage. Like this was like archived. This was, a time capsule, so to speak. Like I was watching, and we'll talk about it a little later. This was back when you had to ask people their pro record. Like you didn't just know. Like they didn't have really backed up statistical shit. They didn't have footage of it. It's like you showed up and they're like, yeah, what's your record? And you just tell them, and like you might be undefeated that day. Who knows what they can say, So I don't know. I This one was really fun to experience. And when you say that it was like a guy making a movie and he picked a fighter and they wanted to put it on HBO, like, okay, that's a little different than I was watching. I thought this was like, and Michael Jordan's The Last Dance, how he had been recording himself throughout the finals and stuff. I thought this is what Mark Kerr was doing. I thought he was locked into the game. I was like, dude, he knew that this was gonna be a crazy story to tell. That's why I was into this. But
Yeah, no, so I think that brings up a great point and a good time to mention this. If you are looking for a more in-depth, I'm going to go into a little bit of background information about the film, just a little bit. But if you're looking for a more in-depth background kind of piece that goes into way more information than what we're going to provide here for the outside of the actual film itself information, I would recommend the On Point MMA video about the Smashing Machine for more context to everything, because they go into a good job of like talking about those kinds of things a little bit more than we would be getting into here. But yeah, I mean, this definitely, it's pretty much was like more of how you're describing, or not how Michael Jordan did it, but like more of what you're saying of like, this is a fighter who's doing a person who's doing something that's unique and unlike any.
yeah, like an Odd Jobs type of documentary. Like,
Yeah, I mean, just a unique and fascinating person's life, more so than just about the sport.
yeah.
I mean, the sport becomes central to it, but it's really more just about Mark Kerr and Mark Coleman's relationship, and then all of these things that happen within that life and his addiction and all this kind of stuff. So I think that the subject kind of took on a little bit of a life of its own over the course of the production of the documentary, and that was ended up how it became what it became.
I think the correlation that I want to make is like, I feel like the way that you're describing it, the way that it happened was like, this is more like Tiger King. It's like they wanted to film something and then they realized there's a little bit more to this. This is like a deeper layer here. So when they get this story, I feel like the way that it progresses and like the ending, and like I feel like they were going a little deeper into the story, and then they finished it, and then they were just out. Like there wasn't like a, well, we'll check in 20 years later. Like it was just like, all right, well, cool, we're dipping out. He's good. Da 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 da. Whatever. So
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that they kind of thought that they got what they wanted out of the subject based on how it ends up, and we'll get to that when we get to it in the review. But yeah, I mean, as far as I understood it, it was really like somebody kind of knew about MMA, had this contact in it, was like, this might be interesting to film, let's film it, and then this is what ended up happening. This is what came out of it.
And what you'll find when we talk about this film is there are so many people that you have no idea that they would love MMA, and they do, and they are true pioneers for making the sport really what it is. Like these are the fans before fans should have even existed, and like they had an opinion on like social media. There's some, not social media, but like on radio shows, we'll talk about that. And like they're actually going and telling people like, this isn't what you think it is, like, and this is back before people knew to do that, so I don't know, it's crazy.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, with the way that like the sport was presented and understood and all of that kind of element of everything. So starting this off, let me just say that the full title of this film is The Smashing Machine: The Life and Times of Extreme Fighter Mark Kerr. And I think it's important to say that full title out, because piggybacking off of what you're saying here, extreme fighter. This was before it was called mixed martial arts in a mass adopted scale. We're going to talk about a little bit later where they call it ultimate fighting. That was what a lot of people called it at the time too, because of the UFC, because that was their only frame of reference. Like, what you're saying with the radio show host who's going to say it's like a brand name and differentiate it. That's because mixed martial arts as a term was not as widely adopted just yet. So that's what I'm saying when like people seeing this, like however many people saw it or didn't see it, that would be an interesting like thing to find out if we could, what like the viewership of this was like. But whatever the case may be, I mean, the fact that this was a look into this world when a lot of people had no frame of reference for it is kind of why it's such a seminal piece of work and so very important here. So that's the first thing to note. This was released in 2002 and then 2002 by HBO. I know you thought I was
the 2002 was pretty good there. All right.
Yeah, I caught myself. But yeah, released in 2002 by HBO. First little piece of background information that's pretty interesting here is this was directed by John Himes, who is a very accomplished director and producer who's still working. Universal Soldier is another series that he's closely tied to. He's a television director a lot. Also a very accomplished fine artist His artwork hangs in the Whitney Museum, so he's accomplished in multi artistic disciplines. One of his sons is the CEO of Indeed, the job hunting website, the job posting board. That's one. His other son, and this is, I think, the more interesting fact to me. Are you familiar with the No Jumper podcast?
Yes.
Do you know who Lush One is? Or just
I have
maybe
to-
just Lush. He was only on there for a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I know the podcast by name. I probably have to see the. Is this
Okay.
the Adam 22 one? I don't know.
Well, yeah, it is Adam 22 is
Okay.
the podcast. But so for a very brief time, the reason I brought that up is because I thought that might be where you would know him from more. But so for a very brief time, there was a dude named Lush on that show. Came and went. Lush was for a very long time a central figure in the battle rap scene. This is a dude that anytime that you were watching battles, he was like a host. He was a battle rap promoter. Occasionally battled early on himself, but kind of took a more of a hosting kind of duty thereafter. That is also his son. So yeah, one son, CEO of Indeed, other son, battle rap promoter and host named Lush One, a person who I have actually had multiple interactions with in the past. I never knew him very well, but from my time in battle rap, knew him from that. So there's a very small little weird, connective tissue in there somewhere, but just interesting background information. So John Himes, interesting guy and interesting family.
Yeah, no, that is definitely interesting. That is a good little story. I think we are ready to get into the movie now.
Yes,
documentary.
Background information aside. So yes, let's start off with this film here. So this starts off with Mark Kerr talking about sensing fear, and it's crazy to me to think how that so rarely translates in this era. Like the first things he's saying in the film are like, you know when your opponent is scared and when you've like mentally broken him, sort of thing, and like when you can kind of like get over on your opponent. And it's like, I'm sure that back then that was like more common, and I'm sure that it still is now, that there are still fighters who you can sense the fear in them to an extent, but the sport is so standardized now, and like everybody who goes into the sport at this point just you know that you can't have that at this point in the way that the sport operates. So like, I don't think that you see fear in your opponent's eyes much anymore, but back then
Leon
probably
Edwards,
very
definitely.
real. Huh?
Leon Edwards, definitely.
All right, so there, yeah. I mean, maybe occasionally, but you know what I'm saying, though. It's like, as for modern fighters, like I wouldn't think, but back then you have a guy who's walking in off the street sometimes, maybe, and it's like, maybe this was the wrong thing for me to do.
Right.
Very rare now, I would say.
We all have bad job interviews, and we all go into jobs that we quit after a day. That's what this is for a lot of people. Sometimes, I don't know. Back then it was. But no, I agree with you. Like the game has evolved too much where it's like being composed is one of the intangibles that you have to have if you're going to make it to this level of the sport.
Right.
What I think is interesting, so the way that this started for me, and it's such an interesting contrast, the way that this starts and then it instantly flips. So this starts with slow motion. You're watching slow motion of Mark Kerr destroying people. He's just elbowing them to blitz, to bits, excuse me. And then he's just talking about it. He's like, yeah, you could just feel it when you just crush somebody's skull in between your hands and the juice flies out. It's like, holy shit, like this dude is a madman, and I'm watching him do it, and he's throwing elbows, and he's fucking nuts. Like these are things that I'm noting as I'm watching this. And then I instantly noted that The Rock, I know we're going to talk about the movie later, guys, but we're going to get it out the way now because I have to mention.
Sure.
The Rock looks dead on like Mark Kerr in all the makeup. They couldn't have found a more hulking figure to play this guy, because Mark Kerr, genuinely, when you watch this, you will see this is a giant human being. This is massive of a man, and The Rock actually looks like a different person other than Dwayne The Rock Johnson. So I think it's really, really cool to note that the movie, I mean, they couldn't have got somebody to play a better Mark Kerr as the look. I'll give you that. So
sure, yeah, absolutely. And I guess it is a good place to mention that, of course, watching this ahead of the adaptation, the feature film that's coming out, of course, is somewhat intentional. So we will be watching that as well, and we'll give our thoughts in relation to this. But yeah, no, definitely. From what I've seen, I've tried intentionally to stay away from looking too much at anything related to the feature film because I want to go into it completely fresh. But I have seen a couple of stills and stuff, and yeah, he does look pretty spot on. The big note that I have from that intro part, basically, is just that, like, you're right. He is annihilating people, but he's such a beast in his physique and has the kindest voice of all time. This dude sounds like he should be giving you like legitimately helpful tips on like woodworking or something like that.
Yeah.
He is the most soft-spoken, kind sounding human to ever exist.
That's what I want to talk about in the next scene. Are you ready to move to when the next part, it
He's at the
cuts to,
hospital.
yes, it cuts it to him in the hospital, and he's basically sitting there, and he's basically like, everything fucking hurts. My neck hurts. I got jet lag. My foot is jacked up. My knees tweaked. And then it cuts to him just like in the waiting room, and he's talking to this little old woman. And then here comes the softness in his voice that Thinker's talking about. And this is where I also want to interject and say, he loves mixed martial arts. It's not just he loves annihilating people in the cage, like as it would have led you to believe in the first like 2 seconds that he's telling you that he loves to fucking kill him. But this right here, he's like, it's not just killing a man, it's like showcasing the mixed and the martial of the arts. And we do it so adequately. There's no other place in the world that we can showcase it against each other in like a real setting. And like, he genuinely just wanted her to understand that it's not brutality. Even though I'm sitting in a hospital and all of my body parts hurt, I'm just the most nice person ever, and I want you to understand that this is what I do. Like, it was awesome.
Yeah, well, I mean, this scene is actually, to me, one of the most important in the film, and it hits you right at the very beginning because, again, based on what kind of what I was leading into with all of this, him explaining this to this little old lady,
yes,
is like a representation of explaining it to the world in a way, and the look on this lady's face is smack in between I don't understand and I don't approve, all while Mark is giving the most articulate description of mixed martial arts ever recorded. He sums up mixed martial arts so perfectly. He's saying it's different styles. So, I'm a wrestler and I have to go against a guy who's a striker, and it's, us trying to figure out. And she's like, how can you do, do you hate that person? And he's like, no, we don't hate each other. She's like, how can you do that to someone that you don't hate? And he says, it's a profession. And at the time, it was before it even was, kinda, you know what I mean? Like, sure, they were getting paid, but it wasn't it was certainly not what it is today as a profession. And we still to this day talk about how it may or may not be, a profession based on the fact that you're getting paid so little. Sometimes that's a different conversation, but you know what I'm saying here. It's like these guys were doing it because they were martial artists and there was a financial incentive, sure, but it came from a different place. It was something deeper. And like you said, when it comes to like having that feeling, that deeper feeling about it, no one has it more than this man.
Yeah, no, I said he speaks about MMA like it's art. Like it is. And it really is. I mean, when it comes down to it, it is. And he was so ahead of his time. Like you said, he was so articulate. Like even this was like the early '90s at this point, I think is what it was, or maybe that was
late '90s. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't even have people like that talk about the sport now, and it's crazy that he was so ready to defend what he does. And you don't get a lot of people like that. And then with somebody like that, you could easily just either blow it off or be the big hulking figure that he is and just do whatever. But he actually wanted to have a conversation about it and just like listen to their opinion and tell them why it's not about killing his opponent. He even said, I think, like, sometimes we go for drinks after, like, we're kind of not enemies, it's like just what we do. So
of course, yeah, and we'll talk about a scene a little bit later on where he's with one of his opponents, and it's like a heartwarming scene. They're having it's after some, we'll talk about what the circumstances are, but it's like they are just friendly. So it's nice to see.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So moving on to the next thing that we see here, you kind of referenced it, but we see Eddie Goldman's No Holds Barred radio show. Goldman is still working today, still doing No Holds Barred, covers combat sports outside of MMA mostly now. Still cool that he's active though.
I genuinely am glad to hear that because that was the first thing I said. Eddie Goldman, where is he now?
Yeah.
And he's a genius. This is before Dana White. He was getting the word out there. And if you say he's still doing it, is it a podcast or is it a radio show still?
I think it's mostly him on his website doing written content
Oh,
from what I've seen. He might
like a
still do the.
blog.
Yeah, it looked like it was more bloggy to me. I didn't go too deep, so he might have an audio component to it, but he's covering like freestyle wrestling and boxing a little bit. So it's kind of interesting that he's in the MMA documentary, like the MMA documentary, and doesn't seem that he does much MMA anymore, but
It should tell
maybe
you
that.
something about the business and where we're heading. I don't know. He jumped ship way long ago, I guess.
But yeah, but I mean, jump ship to cover like even less covered things, it would seem. So yeah, you want to talk about love of the game, and that guy is certainly love of the game personified.
His role is to get more eyes on lower, viewed sports, I guess is his goal. Now that mixed martial arts is one of the most, growing sports as it is, freestyle wrestling. All right, let's go. Whatever.
Yeah, and actually to that end, of course, Hulk Hogan has just passed away, and he's been talking a lot about what that means for that freestyle wrestling venture that he was starting up with. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, I guess that is, his passion, and shout out to him. I mean, he predates Ariel Helwani.
Yeah, this dude, he's if I ever see his name, I'll remember it for real.
Yeah. No, he's a G for real. Yeah, that dude is OG definitely.
But so yeah, he was just sitting there talking. I actually don't have much on what he was necessarily saying in this clip because he was just basically advertising like mixed martial arts is something that's coming. You guys should be more aware, and you probably took a little more notes on it.
Well, yeah, no, the only thing that he was really saying was it was just an expansion of what Mark was saying. He was kind of expanding on the idea that this is like no holds barred to an extent, but it's like an extension of Vale Tudo, which is with the Brazilian mixed martial arts essentially before formalized MMA, similar in concept, guys coming in with different styles. So he was just giving a little bit of background information about the sport. Again, giving more context to people who might have had zero context for it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. So going into the next one, there's anything else?
No, we move right into the interviews with his family, with Rutger's family here.
So we go straight to Toledo, Ohio. Shout out Ohio. This is up north, I believe. Maybe it's a different one, but either way, up north. And yeah, it's the family stories and the siblings about how they would fight all the time and this and that he was broke and needed money and actually everyone in the family basically said we did not think that he was gonna be. We didn't think so. Like looking at him, you should obviously assume like, yeah, that dude could probably go manhandle somebody if it came down to it for money. And they were all like, nah, he's not the one. Like, no, he's definitely not gonna be a fighter. And I thought that was crazy. So
yeah, the stuff with his family is only in this scene. He's going to say, jumping ahead just a little bit, Mark himself is going to say that he's somewhat estranged from his family and doesn't really have much contact with them. I would have liked a little bit more like information about what the relationship was or why it's the way that it is. Obviously, his addiction will come into play here in a little while, so you can assume, but I don't want to make that leap necessarily because the way that he's presented often in this film is very sensitive, very caring, very sensible, well spoken and articulate. So I don't understand if the fighting was what got him into this situation where he's separated from his family or if there was something else. It's sort of ambiguous. What's that?
Dawn, probably.
It certainly could have been his relationship with his girlfriend at the time. Yeah, that any of those things could have been it. We really don't get too much information in the documentary about that aspect. That's one thing that I would have liked a little bit more from this documentary about because they're only featured in this one little part. His siblings look so much like him. I thought that was interesting. And his dad literally hits you with the human cockfighting note, which is what a lot of politicians and people who were opposed to mixed martial arts back in the day would use as their kind of talking points for why they didn't think that it should be legal, why they didn't support it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, this one, I'm glad you brought up that the very little amount about the background of his family was in there. I think there was a clear, like, there was a documentary made for Mark Kerr here, but this ended up kind of halfway being about Mark Kerr, and then we'll talk about the other person that it was mostly about by the time it was over. So I don't know what happened with a lot of I think we are going to get into it with his wife and stuff like that, but yeah, I don't know where all that went and why it ended up kind of being a halfway kind of thing.
I mean, probably just because of the circumstances and dynamics of where Mark Kerr was in his life with addiction and all these things, and then where, I mean, we can just say it. It's Mark Coleman.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to make
it.
it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess
it's not really like a big cliffhanger on this one, but yeah, Mark Coleman is the other central figure of this piece, and I think that I think it almost had to be because of where we're going to get to with the Pride Grand Prix later on. There was potential for them to have to fight each other, them being friends. I think that kind of it sort of came into its own because of that, and that dynamic is very interesting. Having two friends that potentially could have had to fought each other.
Yeah, I thought the story was pretty good. I just thought it maybe shouldn't have been titled the Mark Kerr story if they maybe were going to have Mark Coleman in there a lot too. Like they could have thrown the Hammer in there too, is all I'm saying.
Sure, yeah, Smashing Machine / Hammer or something. Yeah, I know what you mean.
The Smashing Hammer. Like, come on, we got to be creative.
Yeah, well, that aspect of it, I mean, it does come around to still being about Mark Kerr in the end. So it's fine. I think it's fine, all of that. But being that it is about Mark Kerr, like I would have liked to have known a little bit more about that, because it kind of is just they're featured for this very small part, his family. They're not featured again. You get this one little piece of information about them being estranged, and then the family dynamic kind of goes out the window. And there's probably a lot more to that story that we don't get.
Right. Yeah. I feel, last thing I'll say is I feel like this is just like a blip in time that we're getting for Mark Kerr. We don't really get the much after, and we don't get the much before.
Sure.
Like,
right.
so
Yeah, exactly. It's very true. Yeah.
it jumps you right into a lot of stuff that he's doing. We'll talk about it here soon.
Yeah, exactly. A slice of life for sure.
Yeah.
So now we're cutting to footage of his first fight in Vale Tudo in Sao Paulo. And Mark talks about not being able to hold down a Dixie cup's worth of water because of nerves, and then cut to him absolutely fucking obliterating this dude.
Yes.
This guy, he's fighting a dude in a black shirt. I didn't do my research on who he was fighting here. I'm sure I could find it, but it's a heavy set guy. When we were talking about what I mentioned at the top here, where people who may or may not have been like suited for this life coming into this sport, this guy that he's fighting here is absolutely one who was not suited to it, and this dude just gets absolutely wrecked, knees to the face on the ground. This dude is being butchered for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that was hilarious too. Yeah, everyone gets nervous was my note. It's like, it doesn't matter who you are, man. Nerves can get to you, guys. They can ruin a good day, you know? So, and then he goes in there, and I said, oh God, his opponent. Oh my gosh. And yeah, so he knees him and takes him down immediately and destroys the fat guy. Knees to the grounded knees. Holy shit, destroyed him. More clips of this killer. And then I had to note here, yeah, the game was gruesome back then.
That's an overarching note for all of this, and we'll talk about it in a couple of different places. But yeah, I mean, you said it exactly correctly, man. You're 100% right. It goes like my next note was literally straight up legal headbutts. This is old school, headbutting. He'll talk at some point about eye gouging, about pulling the cut, on the eye just to make it bleed a little bit more. You're going to do those things, he says. And it's like, this was real no holds barred back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The ref didn't really, he was just told not to let each other die. Like that was basically what it was, so.
And so that, yeah. And so, when we get to the point when there's a little bit of a dispute about rules, that's another interesting note in the big picture here, is that not only are you getting the slice of life in Mark Kerr's life, Mark Coleman's life, but you're also getting kind of an interesting time capsule of the sport, because this is a portion of the history of the sport where they finally were enacting some semblance of rules,
right.
They were starting to say no knees to downed opponents, and no eye gouging, no headbutting, these kinds of things. It was just now starting to happen, and some people could keep up and some people couldn't.
I think what was also, since you brought that up, I think what's funny to note about that is the getting the rule set actually on the books or whatever, excuse me, it was literally just get everybody in a room, get all the fighters, and just tell them the rules. Like, it wasn't like they had a rule book to go read. It's like, all right, so you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that, you're
Right.
not going to do that, and they're all like, but I can do that, and they're like, nope, not that one either, and it's like, all right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You know, you hear often during events now where the referee will say, "We went over the rules in the back." That's generally the referee and the fighter actually verbally going over the rules. That was not the case here. This was a rules committee in a big
Yes.
conference room, just telling everybody what the rules are, and everybody being like, okay, I think I understand." So, yeah,
The
very,
dude in the
very
back
different.
just didn't even he doesn't even speak what she's here, so
Right,
whatever it is.
exactly. Yeah, and we'll touch on that when that's coming up here in just a little bit as well. So, back to the timeline of the film.
Yes.
Eddie Goldman explains that Ultimate Fighting is a brand name for the UFC. As we see the first footage of the UFC, a lot of people at the time called MMA Ultimate Fighting.
Mhm.
So, that's the interesting element. We kind of went over that already, but like, just the fact that this didn't even have a proper name to a lot of people, or an agreed upon name within the community. It was Ultimate Fighting, it was Extreme Fighting, it was Cage Fighting. This is a formative era of the sport, and that I think speaks to that. And the reason that they put that in there, I would surmise, is for that exact reason, is to let you know that, like, it's not Ultimate Fighting is UFC. UFC is not MMA, even though they didn't have MMA yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In this scene with Eddie, he's definitely talking about, in the mid 90s, that this was marketed on brutality. Like, this is what they wanted you to come to see, was the brutality of it. But in all reality, you didn't really get that every single time. It wasn't what it was. You'd get that every now and then. And I think it was just an interesting thing to note, is they had to flip the way that they had to get the audience's attention. It's not, come watch brutal people, people brutalize each other. It's like, come watch these athletes, kind of deal. So
Absolutely, yes. And nothing signifies the selling point of the brutality more than the clip of Just Bleed Guy that we got in there. Oh, it always does
yes.
my heart good to see Just Bleed Guy. And, there's nothing more emblematic of exactly what you were just talking about than Just Bleed Guy. So I always love to see that, dude.
Yeah, I actually didn't know. I don't know what that's from or anything. I only know the meme. So when he came on the screen, I'm like, holy shit, I know the guy. I did the yeah.
Yeah,
So it was
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
good.
exactly. Leo and Once Upon a Time, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, that's really, I think it is. He himself is a time capsule. You know what I mean? Because he's not from. He's from an event. He's just a
Yeah.
fan at an event, but he's emblematic of a bygone era in this sport. So good to see him represented here.
Hell yeah.
So Mark Kerr is talking about how Pride offered him a contract and he jumped ship and went over to Japan. And I said, that's why it took 27 years for and a major motion picture to get you into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But that's more of a joke on current Dana White, rule with an iron fist than anything else. But interesting at the time that, Pride was a legitimate competitor to the UFC. I mean,
Mhm.
Pride was really more where it was at. The UFC was kind of small potatoes in the broader MMA landscape at the time, because Japan was the place. It was Pride, it was Dream, it was Rings, it was these early organizations that were doing the big promotions. And I mean, you see this footage, the stuff in stadiums and the amount of people that are interested in this in that country. It's a very interesting thing to think about how different mixed martial arts was back then versus now. I mean, I'm sure that there are still people that are familiar. For a little research that I did on Japan and their current MMA landscape, people do know like Ryzen fighters. Like, they will know some of them by name, the same way that you, like, in conversation, could mention a fighter from the UFC and people would know it. But like, it's nowhere near. It can't be anywhere near as what it was when they're selling out the Tokyo Dome for these things.
Yeah, this was a crazy thing to see. So yeah, it was the Pride years. October 97 is what they gave us the date on, and a baseball stadium is what they sold out for the Pride events. And that is absolutely nuts. And I even said, like, if they did it back then, where are we now? Why are we getting a baseball stadium now? Ilya, whoever you want it to be. I mean, give us one baseball stadium. I don't care about the sphere. I mean, one some stadium would be cool, and they want to talk about the weather. It's like, dude, they did this back in '97, and they didn't have no problems with it. They did it outdoor on canvas in the ropes with the wind blowing. Who cares? Whatever you want to say.
Well, I would think that might be a part of why they don't do that anymore. Is climate control probably plays a pretty big factor. Having called live fights in open air, if you're in any kind of climate that has any level of humidity to it, it weighs very heavy on these fighters. Like I've seen people collapsing,
Fair. No,
fighting outside. So but I mean that's probably just one part of it. But yeah, I mean I would think that the interest in Japan just I think culturally maybe has evolved a little bit. Like there probably are still fight fans, but just Japanese culture over time maybe changed a little bit. I don't know. It's an interesting element of that whole thing, and I'm sure that there's a lot more about the Japanese politics and behind the scene, and the Yakuza is definitely involved in a lot of that. So, no, I mean it is. I mean the Yakuza was legitimately involved in a lot of MMA back at that point. So, I mean, there's probably some elements that are interspersed there that play a lot of different factors as to why the current makeup is what it is compared to what it used to be.
So selling out baseball stadiums is pretty nuts. Mark Coleman is basically saying, like, at the time, I'm the best. Like he was pound for pound #1, basically international star. I said he may as well have been Tyson, but not. Tyson was obviously bigger, but like this dude was like in Japan. They knew him. He was out there being a god. So that was really key to note. I know he may not be the American star that a lot of people know, but like in Japan, there's probably a good deal of 60-year-old people that are like, yo, yeah, Mark Kerr was running our fucking shit back then. So cool.
Yeah, well, this is you were talking about Mark Kerr that time, right? Because
yes,
yeah, okay, because I think you said Coleman, but
yeah,
no, all good. Because I just wanted to make sure that he doesn't come into the story for a little bit, so I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. But no, absolutely. I mean, these guys were legitimate stars back then. I mean, like I very interesting to me with Bob Sapp, who was a big hulking fighter, ended up being a little bit of a paper tiger, but he was a huge star. Like I mean he was on commercials, had action figures, like music.
I feel like this dude was in the WWE for a time, but
he probably was. I mean it probably would have been a better place for him because he was not like he turned out to not be a like that great of a competitor when it came to mixed martial arts, but he was massive. So I mean they were just fascinated with big guys beating each other up, for that time and place. And also Japan has a rich history of pro wrestling as well, so there's a lot of crossover there too.
Yeah, true. I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
So the next scene that we get into is Dawn and Mark at home. This was pretty sweet, pretty chill. I was duped instantly, I'll tell you that, for what we get later. Because she's actually pretty nice. She's talking about how all the other girls talk about how he's too massive and he's too big, and she loves it. I'm like, oh, she's the little D Devlin. She's been there from the beginning. And she'll do anything. And we're watching Mark Kerr just fucking. We're watching Goliath lift fucking weights. He's like picking her up with one arm, and doing all this other shit is crazy. And then it just goes instantly to him sticking a needle right in his fucking vein. Dude, it was the craziest transition ever.
Oh yeah, you get a pretty clear picture of some of the more real life elements in that kind of thing. Yeah.
The cameraman zooms in on the needle inside this dude's vein.
Yeah.
And the needle is pulled out, and you see his skin it was disgusting.
Well, yeah, and you can see on his arm all of there's a essentially just a large track. I mean he was a user. I mean this is it's painkillers. We're not talking heroin here, but it pretty close. I mean it's opiates. It's narcotics as he says. So yeah, it's bad.
It's unfortunately what sports were at the time when it was, combat sports, especially, not just, I mean, pro wrestling was also in there. It's not really a combat sport if you want to say, but there's a lot of drug issues with the opiates and the painkillers and stuff like that. They were easily accessible. There's a scene later that we're going to talk about with Mark Kerr. He's just on the goddamn phone telling the dude what pills he's going to take. He's like, no, I think I'm going to need the Oxy because the thingy-mabob, it just made me feel like shit last time. I'm going to need this stronger one.
Yeah, he's ordering it like he's ordering a pizza.
I think I have that in the note. but yeah, sure, it's absolutely crazy. Like that was And that's what's interesting about the story too, is like when people are able to overcome things like that, it's like it wasn't necessarily them being a fucking junkie. It's like this is what they had to do to be the best in the sport. You have to be able to combat that pain that you're going to accrue. You know, it's crazy, but this is what real life actually is, and that's a great documentary piece right there, I tell you.
For sure. No, absolutely. And you make a good point with that, because yeah, you know, you're seeing an addict to an extent, but like when you hear this guy speak and you see the way that he conducts himself, like this is the definition of a functional addict. You know, this
Yeah.
is a person who is in a tremendous amount of pain on a regular basis, who is having to overcome that regularly and continuously pushing himself to the limit in order to do this thing that he does, is, you know, to conduct his profession and stuff.
There's another point. I don't know if it's this one or maybe we'll talk about it later. He's talking about what is happening to his body when he's doing these things. He's like, you know, you're there, like you feel like you're there, but then in reality, like like your body's falling or your hands are down, like you're not doing the things that normally you would do, but your brain feels like you are, but you're slowly falling asleep is actually what's happening. Like, and
Sure.
it's just like it really sucks. Is like what the home life has to be for them if they want to be able to compete at the highest level, and that's not what it is anymore, thankfully. There's a lot of different rules and regulations that they have in place that they can't just go out here and take a bunch of painkillers and fuck themselves over. You know, it does happen in certain cases, which is unfortunate, probably, and in most professions, probably. But
Yeah,
I
well, I
just
mean,
think
now,
it's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Now, I mean, now there's a culture around the sport where there's support. You know, there are nutritionists and athletic advisors and you know, sports therapists and all
Yeah,
these types of things. I mean, there's more of an infrastructure now. Back then, it was you, your coach, your family, and go fight.
yeah.
So yeah, just a different way. You know, again, this is why it's such a time capsule of this whole thing. So just to backtrack just a little bit, to keep myself on track here. So yeah, this is the portion where Mark says that he isn't close with his family anymore, and aside from his girl Dawn, you know, his girlfriend, he doesn't have any family right now. But we had just seen his family, so I was like question mark on that. And then yeah, that was pretty funny when when Dawn was talking. You know, this is our introduction to his girlfriend Dawn, and she says, yeah, paraphrasing her, saying, a lot of girls would think that he's too big, but for me, not a problem. You know, so that was all there. Yeah, and then Mark talks about the opiates pipeline from Mexico, and you see him shooting up, you know, shooting up painkillers. I don't like needles, so that was definitely pretty gruesome, but it is a real look at it. So you get the straight dope from this documentary, so to speak, and yeah, that was very visceral.
Mhm.
Then yeah, so after that, we cut to Mark negotiating his contract with the Japanese on his own behalf. I thought that that must have been a bit of a headache to have to navigate.
Yeah,
You're doing it for yourself and having a translator translate.
yeah, he's like talking today. He's like, tell him I want more. Like, no, I tell him I need the more than that. And they're like, he's like, yeah, and he's
Yeah,
like, no, no, tell him, no, you got to tell him. Like, it's pretty funny. He's trying to communicate through translator to get more money out of these guys, and it's pretty funny. Very funny scene, I thought there. So,
yeah, just
and he's so sweet, you know, like he's not trying to be, you know, anything. So
right. Of course, yeah, yeah. He's trying to still be himself, kind and gracious, but at the same time, like, yo, you need to do right by me
yeah,
a little bit. And you know, that was a very small little piece of that. But could you just imagine the stuff that went on behind the scenes with no cameras involved? I mean, you know, I'm sure that plenty of guys were getting screwed over left and right. Kerr himself probably, you know,
yeah.
in certain instances, I would suspect.
Yep, and then so the next scene we go right into Mark Coleman. This is where we get our introduction. Oh,
Real quick,
sorry.
sorry,
Okay.
was real quick before
Go
we
ahead.
get to that though. So there's a brief scene, because this is where he's doing that negotiations. They're in Japan, and they're, you know, getting ready for an event, and it shows a bunch of the fighters, right? And admittedly, I don't know every fighter shown in that scene by face, but there was one quick shot of a tattoo on the back of someone's head, and I said I would recognize that tattoo anywhere. There's Vanderlei Silva. So, you know, Vanderlei is in the documentary very, very quickly. And if you know his head tattoo, you know it was him.
Well, this is the point that Henry also noted him as well. He was like, "Oh my God, there's Vanderlei," but he also is in the documentary later. I don't know if you
I
forgot
mean,
that.
he's in pieces, but like he's
Yeah,
not actually like. That's the thing is that you'll see like clips of certain people, like Hoist Gracie is there and Sakuraba is there, but like they're not like central figures. They don't get like interviewed
yeah,
and stuff. It's actually like interesting in that regard because again, this is about these people. It's about Mark Kerr, Mark Coleman, the surrounding people in their lives. But it would be very different if this was the Pride documentary, where it's like we're going to talk to all of the fighters, we're going to talk about the sport, and then talk to each individual, and this was about these people and their lives. So you don't necessarily have all that much of other fighters. A couple of small points, but like known fighters that we would know now, they're shown, but they're just shown. They're not
yeah.
necessarily spoken to.
Yeah, it's like, who cares about their opinion type of deal. And it's like, well, in the future we would have, but
Exactly. They're considered legends of the sport now. So
yeah.
yeah, at the time they were just other guys.
Yeah, it's like videotaping. It's like, all right, we got some dudes in the tub, and it's like the greats of the sport right there. And they're like, all right, go ahead and say hi because we're moving on, and then we're gonna go talk to the
Yeah.
fucking Japanese people.
Exactly, absolutely. So yeah, so sorry to interrupt. Go
No,
ahead about
yes.
Mark Coleman.
So Mark Coleman shows up. This is where we find out that he and Mark Kerr and Mark Coleman are teammates. They're pretty good friends. I wonder. Oh, this is where I noted if he'll be in the movie, of course. And as we continue watching this, he definitely should probably be in the movie, I guess. If this is what the documentary of Mark Kerr ended up being, the movie, the reiteration or the recreation of it, probably should have Mark Coleman somewhere in it. I wouldn't even be surprised. And I know this is crazy to say, but if Mark Coleman is going to be some sort of focal point in the story, they might even have like him saving his family in it. I just think that might end up happening in the movie. They might have
Like
thrown that in there.
Yeah, they like take that from the future and like insert it into the past.
Yeah, something like that.
Could be. Well, and this is going to be an interesting thing, and that's why I'm glad that we're doing this here and now and going over it point by point, because when we do watch the feature film, the adaptation, it's going to be interesting to see what they're, because this documentary is very much a documentary. This is it's a narrative to an extent, but it's not like, it doesn't have the beats of a film necessarily. Right. So like it's going to be very interesting to see the comparison of the documentary to what we end up getting in the dramatized fictional adaptation version.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that is going to be interesting to see who's going to be cast as Mark Coleman. Hey, listen, we're going with the WWE guys. Go for Goldberg. I think that works perfectly. But I could be wrong. And you seem like you don't know who Goldberg is.
No, of course I know who Goldberg is. Come on, undefeated guy. That was my legitimate era when I was watching. But no, I was thinking to myself, I think that I might have seen in my research for this, I think that Ryan Bader might be playing Mark Coleman in the documentary, which is very strange because Ryan Bader, also an MMA fighter, but I didn't know him to be an actor. So I don't know. Maybe that's misinformation. I don't know.
Yeah, so either way, Mark Coleman's in the movie. We get a clip of this guy named Igor. I think you probably can say something about this guy. I don't know who he is.
Oh, Igor Vovchanchyn?
Oh, he's Igor. Sorry, yeah, I heard Ivor. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Igor Vovchanchyn is he's like a another one of the legends of old. But yeah, so we get young Hammer. We get young Mark Coleman for the first time. He's in Japan there. He was saying that him and Mark Kerr had wrestled against each other at one point and then became close friends thereafter. So, former foes, quote unquote, but then they're, now close. They're close friends. And this is the lead up to Mark's fight with Igor Vovchanchyn at Pride 7. That's the fight that we're leading up to here. And yeah, Vovchanchyn, I mean, he was just yet again, you're in an era of like kind of legendary fighters. And, there are obviously going to be people that like drop off and kind of go, fall by the wayside. But Vovchanchyn is definitely one that is a known, like big name of the era. So there's actually a fighting Grand Prix kind of tournament style event. I forget what promotion does it, but it is named after Vovchanchyn.
Gotcha. So we see him. We also see more clips of guys getting beat up, I believe, getting their ass whooped. And then it goes to Mark, and he's talking to, I believe he's talking to like a ring girl or something. He's talking to the stats lady, and this is where I brought up earlier, where he just told them his record. Like they didn't actually have a way to check. He just tells them like, well, I've never lost, and I've won 16 or something like that. 16 fights at this point or something like that. Mm-hmm. And they just like write it on a list and walk away and go to the next fighter. Like it was interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that in my mind, I thought that that he was talking to a media member and that it was like an interview, but you could be right. It might have just been that. It might have just been like him legitimately just telling them. But I think at Pride, probably by Pride era, they might have been keeping stats a little bit more like closely because they would use that for promotion. That's actually an interesting note that I didn't even have in my notes, but thinking about it now that we're talking about it, like the way that Pride like cared about the promotion of of their fighters and the product was interesting because like later on we'll talk a little bit later on I have a note about how like at one point they actually sent like representatives from Pride to go like check on Mark. He had pulled, again we'll get into all of this, but like there for reasons like they sent like representatives to like ensure that their investment is being
Right.
maintained, that kind of thing. So like Pride was big business, this was like legit. Of course, it's like it feels so long ago and so foreign to us now, but like at the time, like these were hot commodities and hot properties. So the only reason I say that is to say that they probably were keeping better records like at this point in history only because it's a selling point at that point.
Yeah.
It's like this guy's undefeated. We got to make sure that we know he's undefeated and how many people that he has beaten and all that kind of stuff.
And then I think this is where we get the meeting with the council, and she's like, "No bites, no eyes, no headbutts." And then I'm like, "Man, Pride rules are legit." And then you notice that it's literally just a little lady talking on a microphone to 17 fighters or whatever, like 16. I guess it's got to be an even number, guys. 16 fighters just in a classroom type of deal, and they're just like talking, and it's just pretty weird and funny. But
Yeah,
whatever.
they're in a like a convention center hall room, or a convention hall like setup
Yeah,
room, like a breakout room. And yeah, it's the rules committee going over the rules with the fighters. And I thought the one interesting note from that was that at one point, I guess an interpreter for probably one of the Russian fighters or the Ukrainian fighters, whatever, like she stands up and she's like, so does this mean that you can't you can't knee when they're on their hands and knees? Like she's trying to clarify,
yeah,
and it's like you're getting it from the Japanese who are translating it into English to translate it to Russian for this fighter. Like the confusion is so like you could already kind of like feel that there was going to be confusion based on like these are the rules, go have fun, the way that they kind of
yeah.
like we're going over everything. But we're going to find out too that again this is an evolutionary period because the rule set had been changing at this time. So like a bunch of fighters might not have known the rules from before were different, and this might have been their first exposure to that going into this fighting event that they're going to be partaking in.
Yeah, no, this was a pretty interesting scene. And then it gets us, and then I think that wraps up what I have to say about the
Oh
commission.
yeah, that was about it. Yeah.
So we go into the next scene, and we're about to go into a fight. Dawn is actually, I've noted that Dawn comes to the fights. She's actually a Chad for that. Shout out to her. Like I said, I was duped. So you guys are gonna have different opinions from me here in a few about Miss Dawn.
Well,
But
that's
yeah,
the way that the documentary sets her up. I think it lends itself to that, with the rug getting kind of pulled out from under you. Because yeah, when she first starts off, like she was there before he was a fighter. She's seems like a good girl based on everything that we're seeing from her. And so you're exactly right to think that at this time.
yeah, no, and it was pretty nuts. So we get shots of Kerr and Coleman. They're locked in, so they're both fighting today, and maybe one of them was in a suit. I can't remember at this time, but they're both locked in, and then they're showing a whole fight. Basically, it's rough, it's grindy, and then what I also wanted to note is in this you get to hear the active cornerman that is Dawn the entirety of the fight. She was going crazy. She had some good words too. Like I said, I bought into what they were selling with Miss Dawn here. I thought this was gonna be. I was thinking, marry her now, Kerr. Like, what are you doing after this
Right.
fight? Get it
Yeah.
done.
They were certainly setting it up to be like a fairy tale ending in that regard. It certainly will not be. But you did mention that she comes to the fights, but Mark himself says, don't bring the wife and kids to the fights. And I
Nice.
was like, I agree. Thanks, Mark. I'm always saying that. Wife is there, though, or, girlfriend is there. Dawn is there. And I did think it was pretty funny that backstage scene that you're talking about where they're watching. I think they're watching the fights that are happening, before they fight. So, they're watching the feed. And at one point she comes up to Mark and like tries to say something to him, and he just kind of like, go get out of here kind of
Yeah.
thing. And he's just locked in watching the fights. He's like he doesn't want the distractions, and that's what he says. He's like, you got to be locked in. You got, you don't want to have distractions while you're there, so don't bring the wife and kids. And I'm like, don't bring the wife and kids for that reason, and also don't bring them in case you're going to get brutalized. But
Yeah.
for one or the other reason, obviously very different now. Fighters are always bringing the families to the fights, but yeah, it was just a funny little moment there because
Well,
she's trying to buzz in his ear and he's not having it.
to be fair, I mean, just to clarify, it is encouraged to have your family come to the events, buy the promotion, because that sells out ticket sales. So I would just say that gets people in
What?
the seats. That gets people in the seats. If you're in the cage and you tell your family to go, that's sales right there. The business loves that. Come
Well,
on.
no way. They first of all, a lot of those are given away. I mean, a lot of times that if you're like
You get
fighters,
free.
yeah, I mean, a couple of them are comps, and like, I mean, I don't think anybody is buying tickets because they know that their family's going to be there. Oh
Hey,
man, I
my
wasn't going to
cousin
go to that fight, but
Justin Poirier is my cousin, and he fights in Louisiana. Whoa, that's fucking. Anyway, but either way, I digress. Okay, so you get to the fight, and they're tired as fuck. Like they are setting this up as like the most dramatic fall off like ever in a performance. Like this is a slow motion, watching them gas out, and they're laying on top of each other. They're standing in front of each other, and then Kerr gets a knee to his head. And it fucks him up.
yeah, this is the Igor Vovchensin fight that we're talking about, him versus Mark Kerr here.
Yes, so he gets in a headlock, gets kneed in the head, gets fucked up, and this is like his first loss. Is basically what I'm reading it as. Maybe that's not what actually was at the time, but first loss. And then he gets up and he's complaining to the ref, complaining about the ref to the owner, and the backstage is actually what happens here. He was a little upset about it, mad about the stop. And I think this was the point where I think the documentary was trying to show like this is how dedicated he is to his craft. Is like he was willing to continue getting beat up when he was tired, getting kneed in the head. Like that was my read from this right here. I don't know if you have a different opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, they show you a good amount of the fight footage, and the knees on the ground are the inciting incident here that's causing Mark to get a little upset, and the ref calls the fight off. He basically ends the fight while Mark's claiming, even though Mark was very slow to stand, he was definitely rocked. But so he's saying that like he's backstage and he's talking to the promoters saying that this ref was bullshit. Goes talk to the Pride people saying that the knees were fouls. He's confident in that. And so I think that it is definitely I think his devotion to the sport is just natural. Like whether the documentary wants to show it or not, you're going to get that. But I also think it goes back to the point that I had been making about like the rules are just nebulous sometimes. Like you're a lot of the fighters just might not know. So like what we're going to see here in a second is that there's going to be another fighter. Anthony Macias is the name of this guy here. He's on screen for a brief portion. This is one of the few times you do see another fighter actually like speaking on screen. But Anthony Macias is the fighter, and he says the rules were a little fluid in their enforcement, sometimes in favor of the Japanese. He was like, I had to ask what I could and couldn't do during my fight, is his quote. So yeah. I think that that's more of what they were showing too, is just like A, Kerr's devotion always to the sport, and B, the rule set was a little bit weird, and that it was enforced a little selectively, and that Pride might have been a little shady, that kind of thing.
No, I hear you. Yeah, this one, and then we get to Kerr going to the locker room with his team. He's super upset. Everyone else is taking, the loss super bad. And this is what humbling is. This was at a time. This is what a humbling performance would do to Mark Kerr. It's like it looked like it affected him a lot. Like there's actually, I think this might be the scene where he goes and like he cries into a towel kind of thing.
Yes, that's exactly what this is. And yeah. when he cries after that loss, man, you feel it. You know what I mean? Like that's one of those ones where it's like it hits you anytime, because there's a couple of times where Mark gets emotional in this film, and because of the genuine, kind-hearted human being that he portrays himself as always in this, and you feel is very genuine. Every time that he gets emotional, it's like, oh man, that's like you get that single man tear going. It's like right. It really does. Like it hits you in the heart.
Yeah, no, that was definitely interesting. And then so we get into the next scene kind of deal where Coleman is also losing his fight, is what I was reading it as. I believe he lost. I don't know if he actually walked away with win. I don't know if they showed the thing, but we get into a conversation where Kerr is oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just because before this actually I think is a kind of a big note to mention here. Before we get to Coleman's footage, Dawn just drops dime on Mark pretty 100%, and she goes full in on it, saying Mark barely trained for this fight, and 2 weeks beforehand we were out partying.
Oh,
It's
nice.
like,
Oh, yes, I did
I
catch
was
something
like, okay,
around
so
that.
a little bit of like a tipping of the hand of like kind of foreshadowing of some of the things to come here. That maybe there's some issues behind the scenes outside of the fighting element of stuff that might not have been going correctly in Mark's life.
Yes. Okay.
So
So
then we
my
get to
apologies.
then we get to Mark
Yes.
Coleman's footage. Sorry.
Mark Carman's footage. Then we go to a conversation in the back where Mark Kerr is talking to the translators, to his opponents. He says something that I think he's basically wants. He's saying like, "I want to get it a no contest." Like I'm trying to. That's something around that sort. He actually dropped the word orgasmic in this conversation, which was pretty nuts. Like that should tell you how passionate he is. I mean, if he's willing to drop that word in casual combo, I mean, it must be pretty serious. His opponent is apologizing. This is Igor, right?
This Igor Vovchanchyn, yeah.
Yeah, so Igor's apologizing. Kerr is still pretty upset about like the call because he keeps bringing it up. He just won't like, and you'll see actually like at the end of these fights, they oftentimes have to just share the location with their opponent. Like they just either are in the ballroom or they're in the locker room and they just are with the opponent they just fucking fought. Which is what Mark Kerr was talking about in the beginning, like we have to work together. We have to go.
Yeah, because it's almost like a bullpen of sorts. It's like they're just like these open spaces where like everybody's just sort of milling. They didn't really like segment and put people in different rooms all that much, at least the way that it's portrayed here. So yeah, you just like have this wide open space where it's like you might be on one side of the room and the guy that you're fighting is 5 feet away from you, kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%.
And one thing to note too, though, is that the footage that they showed of Mark Coleman, that was him losing the UFC heavyweight title to Maurice Smith. Never forget, Mark Coleman, the first champion of the UFC. So, if you ever, for any of the people who, are sometimes maybe newer, who wonder why people like Mark Coleman are held in such high esteem, that's the OG champion.
Yeah, I actually, that is something that I'll bring up right now. It's like I earned a lot more respect for what I should understand a pioneer is in this sport. It's not somebody like, Anderson Silva and, GSP, like those to an extent are pioneers, but like these are truly, they did things that like are not going to be tallied in the stat books to get the sport where it needed to be. Like these are not things that are going to be ever, like you have to watch the documentaries and you got to learn about Mark Coleman's story to really understand, because he genuinely is a pioneer. Like Davy Crockett ain't got shit to Mark Coleman. Like damn.
It does my heart good to hear you say that. So yes, I'm glad that that's what you took away from this, because I mean, I do feel like and yet again another shout out to On Point MMA, or MMA On Point, saying that like a lot of the history of this sport is not like that well documented. Things like the Smashing Machine are a lot of like the documentation of this era of the sport, and channels like theirs. So I for history's sake, when it comes to this sport, I think that things like this are important. So as a newer fan, I'm glad that that's what you take away.
Yeah, and so they seem friendly enough after a certain point. After
this was the scene that I was talking about with Vovchanchyn when you were talking about the no contest and everything. I was saying that they ruled the fight a no contest, and the knees apparently were legal in Pride up until that event. Mark says, and that's what is key to note with this, is that like from Pride 1 to 6, apparently knees of that sort were legal, and then in this event they were illegal. Vovchanchyn even says, it was not intentional. And he's like, no, I know it wasn't intentional. I'm just, telling you why I feel this way. And it was actually a really like heartwarming, genuine moment between these guys who just brutalized each other. They hug each other, and they talk through the translator and everything. So it not only shows you a good human side of the sport, but also just how wonky this whole like changing of rules, changing of the times, the evolution of the sport, like the evolution of the sport, even within this little window, was already like its own thing, and we continuously see it throughout the eras up to where we are now.
Yeah, and so they have their little conversation, and then they go about their ways. And I can't remember exactly what happens here, if it was them talking about it or if he actually just started whipping it out again, but he literally goes right to the drugs. He goes, yeah.
He's asking about that. Yeah, this is why I was like, Mark is open. just openly asking like Pride officials, do you have any
Yes.
narcotics?
Yes.
I was
Oh my
like,
goodness.
bro is on the hunt for Painkiller Jane over here. So he goes from that, and then you jump cut back home in Arizona, and he's still on the hunt, talking to the doctor's office. This is what we were talking about, ordering
Yeah.
the drugs like pizza. He flew across the ocean in pain, essentially, without his drugs, and now he's back home ready to get it again.
It's funny that if that's the reality of what it was, that's interesting. I didn't read it as that, but that actually adds up. He's asking the officials or whatever, like, yo, where do I get the shit that's gonna make me feel better? And they're like, hey, sorry about your luck, man. And he's like, all right, well, I gotta go. I'm gonna go fly over here. I'll take a little drive over to my doctor and I'll get it done. I get it. Okay, that's funny. I get that, but
Well,
yeah. That was very interesting that he just starts whipping out, he starts asking in public about the drugs and then goes to get on the phone and order more drugs. Pretty nuts.
yeah, well, and what I would suspect too is that he probably, the people he was talking to certainly saw cameras around and probably had one thing to say then, but there might have been some access to that type of thing when the cameras were not rolling. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, because it's funny because, at the beginning they're filming him do it and like he probably had his supply then. And then when they ran out and they're like, ooh, camera crew. Yeah, I don't do any of that. I don't write pads like that anymore. But very, very interesting. He is the most professional person ever at speaking on the phone when it is about drugs. That is one thing I will give him is like, you have never seen somebody who's got the more toned voice to talk on the cell phone other than this guy when he wants narcotics. So
It's so funny you say that, because my note is he is the most well-spoken addict I've ever seen in my life.
dude, it's crazy. It's crazy because like there's points too where you'll actually see like what the drugs are doing to him. There's a shot later where he's like on the fucking drugs and like you see him like falling out and it's like, but you see what the person is without them. It should just give you a good a good example of like, this is what drugs do to people. It really just turns you into something you're not.
For sure. Yeah. And so also key to note here too is that Dawn, his girlfriend at this point, says there was a time when I guess Mark was concerned about her leaving him. And she said, the only way that I'll leave you is if you don't get clean. Just keep that in mind for some of the things that are going to come up later.
Yeah, so she starts secretly recording him, as I think what I was getting out of this, but maybe because this was the found footage that I was reading it as, not as like a camera crew guy was sitting in their apartment reading it. So it looked like she had just propped the phone up and just like started recording this conversation, in my opinion. That's how I was reading it, because she walks in there and she's like, I'm not, the only way we're gonna stay together is, if you get clean.
That wasn't on camera though. That was a voiceover thing. But there might have been a different. No. I think the one that you're talking about is when they're in the kitchen. Yeah, they were arguing about some weird thing in the kitchen at one point.
Either way.
Yeah.
So yeah, she gives him the ultimatum about drugs. Him speaking about the effect of drugs right here. This is where he's like, talking about how, you could be feeling one way mentally, but your body's doing something else.
Right.
And I just wrote like, man, it's just sad. Like, this is just sad what the things that you devolve into.
Yeah, and we'll see some other stuff that's definitely props up those feelings even further. But we cut away from this now, going over back to Mark Coleman, who apparently is the slickest pimp of all time, because he's telling the story of how he picked up his wife, and it just is, he was a bouncer at a club, and this young hottie comes in, and they both lied about their ages to each other, and it turns out that before she was his wife or had just become his wife, she only finds out his actual age when he goes to fight in the UFC, and she saw it on the big screen.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, no, this was definitely the happier story that we should have been following.
Right.
The other one, it could have just told us it was gonna get bad, whatever you want to do. But this one right here, definitely sweet. You got the family shots of Coleman. You got, like I said right here, half Coleman documentary basically. I clocked that halfway through. Like, there was a lot more to unpack here. You get a shot of Coleman getting KO'd. You get him knocked out, something, or TKO'd. Something happened here. And then this is where we get is there anything else you about have a Coleman's
Well,
family?
yeah, well, not about his family specifically, but he says at this point, his quote was, "The sport evolved very quickly, and I just couldn't keep up." And I was like, crazy how back then that was already happening. This is what I was talking about with like the evolution of the sport
Mhm.
and this like as a time capsule of everything. Things are changing rapidly even at this time. And then the knockout that you're talking about is he got head kicked by Pete Williams, and it is a brutal knockout. Like it's
Yeah.
one of those ones where his eyes are wide open and he's just falling stiff. Yeah, that was a pretty bad one. If you want to go look at the the knockout compilations, that's certainly on there somewhere. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for Coleman there. And then we cut to Mark Kerr's friend Darren Farrell, who is interviewed, and he's like a business kind of
Yeah.
person. Do you have anything about that? Because I got a couple of things to say.
Well, he starts by talking about, I at first was confused. I was like, oh, this is just another guy talking about MMA, I guess, because he at first was talking about, when I was watching it, like you had to get it on VHS tapes. You had to go look at it. It wasn't something that was like mainstream for you to find. And when Mark, and he had first said Mark, that's why I thought it was Coleman, because I was like, I mean, they're both Mark. And he's like, Mark told me that he was fighting or whatever, and I thought it was kind of interesting. So I went to one of his shows or whatever, and it was really fun, and blah 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 blah. And then he's like, so when Mark ended up in the hospital, they gave me a call, and it was kind of a weird, it was like, out of all the people, we didn't know about this guy until now, and it's like, this is the guy that not Mark Coleman, sorry, excuse me, Mark Kerr called, when we find out he's on his deathbed, kind of deal. He ODs, like, so it's kind of a weird
Yeah,
shift here.
yeah, I agree. This is an odd change of pace because something quite dramatic, an
Right.
overdose happens here, and this is how we're introduced to it. So it was a little bit of a tonal imbalance, I would say, but an interesting note in general. With this friend. So yeah, it's just like and you kind of get. Maybe it was intentional. It just kind of getting caught off guard by this information. But yeah, you do kind of get blindsided by this. You're cutting to this friend, Darren Farrell, who's being interviewed. He wrestled alongside Mark. He tried fighting. He decided that he didn't want to do it. He's going to go and become the best phone salesman in New York, that he
Right.
says.
Yeah.
And then he ends up being the person that gets the call about Mark Kerr overdosing, and we'll see him in the hospital with him eventually here in a second. But I wanted to mention this because super sleuth St. James over here, I did a little bit of research, and Darren Farrell definitely did become the best phone salesman in New York, because he is now a senior partner at Verizon.
Oh,
So yeah,
nice.
he is like a high up at Verizon. In the documentary, he's actually working for WorldCom, and this is way before, like before either of our times really, but definitely before yours. WorldCom had a very, very big embezzlement level scandal and stuff. So it is pretty funny to see WorldCom in like on his little like
Name
title
tag.
thing,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
like on his name tag or whatever, just on like his placard, and then knowing what eventually is going to happen to WorldCom. But that's just a little funny side note. But anyway, back to the actual story here. We do go on to find out that Mark Kerr has overdosed and is in critical condition in the hospital, basically.
Yes. So we get to the hospital, and then you get Dawn asking a reasonable question to the doctor, and she says some bitchy response. I can't remember what it was. It was like, is he gonna make it? And she's like, well, if he wakes up, yeah. And it's like,
Yeah, the doctors were, I mean, based on her recollection at least, because this is her speaking it out loud. We don't
yeah,
actually hear the doctors, but yeah, they're basically like, that's what he's here for, is to see where we're gonna
that's what
find
it
out,
was.
that kind
Yeah.
of thing. So yeah, it's just like, I guess it's pretty fucking touch and go. And then we end up in the hospital room with that friend Darren and one other friend of Mark's. Mark is in the hospital bed there, and they're basically having an intervention with him at this point. It's another tough scene, honestly. This is one of the tougher scenes in the
Yeah.
film.
Yeah, I think this one hit me and Henry pretty hard. We were watching this, and it's like, these are true friends. I mean, this
Yeah.
is exactly why you called these people. I mean, it may not be the easiest conversation that you ever want to have with somebody, but it is something that you genuinely needed to have. And they were serious about it, and that's all you really need. I mean, you need a lot of different things. I'm not gonna say it's all you need, but like to genuinely be concerned take the next steps to try to make yourself involved in the person's, recovery state. Just try to give them the opinion that you want them here, things like that. And I think they did a great job. And it really was a tough scene, but they knew exactly what they had to say. And shout out to them for being the ones he called, for real.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these were the two best friends that you could have imagined having in this circumstance. Yeah, I thought that they said the exact right things. The one that stuck out to me was when one of the friends says, this is a black and white issue at this point, man. Like, there's no, like he had said that, I guess at one point a couple of years ago, like, they had a conversation about it. Mark was like, oh, I'll keep it under control. I'm trying, and it's like this is the brink right here, kind of thing. And Mark breaks down again in this scene, and yet again, I mean, like, we only get this window into Mark Kerr's life based on this documentary, right? But like, what you've gotten out of him as a human being up until this point, when you see this guy breaking down, like it affects you, like, because you like, this is it's very different when you have like people who are a little bit more gray when it comes to their characteristics, like, people who are maybe a little bit morally ambiguous. Like, you don't get any of that out of Mark Kerr. Like, he is just a genuinely good person going through a genuinely bad time, and that is like that dynamic really, like, you feel that the empathy is definitely there. So yeah, we don't need to dwell on it too much, but that was like, it really, like, this was a very emotional scene to me.
Yeah, and then so the next scene following this is the cleaning out of all of the items
Brother.
and the drug paraphernalia. And my goodness, did this make me feel very sick watching, because the amount of needles and the amount of just empty, drug little vials, whatever you want to say, it was astronomical. And the areas that they were finding them in, the areas they were pulling them out of, the amounts, everything was just disgusting. Not in like, to be fair, he had probably OCD. He was one of the cleaner drug addicts when it came to
Sure,
cleansing.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, just the fact that these were needles that had possibly been used, or even unused needles just sitting around in your apartment or whatever the fuck, is disgusting. But unless you're like, obviously, diabetic, something like that. But I think it was just crazy to see, and it was great to, I mean, things like this are what you want to see a documentary for. If you want to get to the real nitty gritty down to things, I mean, you're talking about a person who is ending up on, a skid of drugs, and these are what comes after. If you're going to get clean and sober, things do have to take place. You can't just throw away the house, I mean, it's just how it has to be.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. The note here is just so many needles.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and yeah, it really, again, from a filmmaking standpoint, is interesting, just because it visual information from that, you know everything you need to know just by the amount of vials, the amount of needles, the amount of paraphernalia. Like, this is something that had been going on for quite some time. Like you said, pulling needles out from under the couch, pulling needles out from random, drawers and cubbies and things like that. Like, it's just, this is an accumulation of, an addiction that has built up over time. And this is where you get to with that. So just in a very quick scene, you get all of the information that you need to know about the level of addiction that Mark was dealing with.
Yeah, 100%. And then so he ends up pulling out of the fight that he has scheduled, and then he clocks himself into rehab. Great move. Interesting that he had a fight still scheduled after but I mean,
because he's because he ends up you can't plan for an overdose necessarily, and up until that point, this is business as usual. That's another, like, element of the addiction, is that that's what I said earlier, he is one of the most functional addicts that you could ever imagine, because it's an addiction that feeds his profession, and by extension, his normalcy, his normal day-to-day operation is fed by his addiction. So sure, he had a fight. It was going to be a Tuesday if it wasn't for an overdose.
It's crazy. As you say it, I mean, it was really like what came first, chicken or the egg. It's like, if I do drugs, then I get to compete. If I compete, then I get to do drugs. Like, not get to do them, but like have to do them. But like, you know, they're gonna coexist. Is like, if I want to continue fighting, well then I get to, you know, also have my painkillers. And if I want to keep doing my painkillers, well, I might as well fight. You know, I'm gonna do them anyways. I guess if the doctors are gonna give them to me, I might as well continue to fight. You know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would think that, you know, the pain medication probably came in because of all of the damage and everything, but
Right.
then, you know, it accumulates. And then, like, to what I had thought about at that point, I didn't even have this in the notes, so I'm glad you reminded me of this. But like, I was just thinking, he is so lucky that, I mean, lucky. I mean, it's definitely in the big picture lucky that he was not doing this when OxyContin and oxycodone were like coming into their own, when the shit with the Sackler family, and they were pushing all of that stuff, like with the pill mills and everything, like, because that was almost around that same era, I would say, or maybe just a little bit later. But like, you know, there was a time where OxyContin was just flowing. You know, they were calling them pill mills. Florida, huge state for this, where it's just doctors would just be writing tens of thousands of scripts, like, you know, for pills all the time. And like, that stuff, you know, is as damaging as any of the stuff that he was doing. So I don't know how much of that was like crossover with that, because I don't think any of that was injectable. But like,
Mhm.
had he been accessing to that, a lot of people like died overdosing on that. Like, you know, many people, families ruined from that. So, you know, at least in a small way, lucky that that wasn't the portion of, you know, that like crossed into his addiction.
Right. No, absolutely. And then so after he checks himself into rehab, we go into Coleman getting ready for his next fight. And what this basically feels like at first, it feels like Coleman's there fighting for both of them. And Henry wanted to know, he was fighting for both of them at this point. It's not just for Mark Coleman. Mark Kerr, that's his homie. He's in the hot, or he's, you know, he's in rehab. He had to pull out the fight, so let me go win it for him. He's also very snippy. He kind of like got real. He got a little mouthy with somebody who was asking him a question or something, and he got a little snippy with them. But then when he got in the cage, I also wanted to note that he didn't look his best. So I don't know. He was just having a bad day. Obviously, I think the rehab and stuff. I think that's what they were trying to get at. Is like, it was weighing heavy on him. He had a lot of mixed emotions going into everything.
I think that that's valid for sure. Yeah, I really like that assessment, honestly. You know, because he does talk at this point about, you know, fighting for his family. He's got kids to feed or whatever. People are saying that he's over the hill, that kind of stuff. So he's kind of got a point to prove and all that. But I do think that the friendship probably was weighing pretty heavily on him, and knowing that his friend is going through a hard time.
Yeah.
I think that makes perfect sense. He does say one thing that I thought was pretty funny,
Please
though.
tell me it's this.
He says, I was out there fighting on pure instinct, but when they took away headbutts, I had to learn a lot of other skills.
Yeah, I had that one in the notes as well. That is definitely a fucking bar right there. When they took away headbutts, I had to learn a lot more skills. Is what I had down.
I
I'm
actually
like,
learned how to fight, you know?
yeah.
Smash my head into people.
I'm like, you know, gee shit. I mean, really, it is what it is. I mean, Jesus. That's what fighting was back in the day, guys. I mean, you really just had to do what you had to do. And Coleman knew it. I mean, like you said, he goes into talking about this is what he does for his family. You know, this is how he provides. He's always been that family man. And then, you know, after this scene, we get a really long extended scene where we're getting subtitles that I didn't care what they were talking about, because this is the pool scene with Gracie.
This is a random kind of scene. It felt like it was a little odd that they included this to me,
Right.
but I think what they were doing was setting up Ricardo Morais, who is going to be Mark Coleman's opponent. This fight that Mark Coleman is going into, that he's setting up for, is at Pride 8, and Ricardo Morais is his opponent, and this guy is fucking ginormous. I mean, he is
Yeah.
a monster of a man, and so you end up in the pool with this dude who's just cracking himself up. He's basically like telling a story about Ricardo Morais and just making himself laugh like to no end. And it was just kind of an odd little moment in this film. Like,
Little one, dude, it was annoying, bro.
Yeah,
It like,
it was just
golly.
like, if there's any criticisms that I do have of this film, because there aren't really many. Obviously I have a grand affection for this film, but if there was any criticism that I have, this scene is a little strange. It like, I guess it's, if you want to say that maybe it's an odd moment of levity, perhaps, but it doesn't even really feel that way. It's just like, you know what it reminds me of? This is so random, but in the movie Boogie Nights, there is a scene where the main character has to go to a drug dealer's house, and the drug dealer has this weird kind of sidekick guy who's like lighting fireworks off in his house and just kind of like cackling to himself, and he's just sort of this odd little side character that's like kind of just almost world building to an extent. Like it's just like, I'm in this very odd situation and this very odd character is here. That's what this guy kind of felt like to me. He's just an odd character that's sort of like giving a weird little context to this strange world that we're in.
I think I'm really glad that I didn't miss anything here, because I'm
No,
watching
yeah.
this entire scene and I had the same thought. I'm like, this is going on way too long and they're not doing anything. Like they're literally just waiting in the water, and like I could care less, to be honest. Like when you said it, just felt like, I don't know, they just had this and they were like, we gotta throw it in somewhere. I mean, shit, like I couldn't. I'm glad, because I remember when we started the review, I kept thinking about this part in the movie. Like, man, I really hope he doesn't have a lot to say about it, because I don't know what they were talking about, and it was so boring. Like,
No, yeah, I mean,
golly.
it's not. I mean, it's not like it went on for forever.
Oh,
It did
dude.
go on long enough. It definitely went on longer than it should have. But yeah, I think all that they were really doing here was just setting up Ricardo Morais for just to show that, because what will eventually happen here is that Mark Coleman ends up beating Ricardo Morais. He takes him down, ground and pound, active on top. Mark Coleman wins by unanimous decision. So I think what they were showing is that, like, even though you have this guy who is this massive, imposing figure, and
Who
this
can
guy is,
swim?
yeah, well, he doesn't even really swim. He just kind of sits there in the pool.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's got this guy hyping him up because he is so huge. Look at this guy. He's a beast. We call him Godzilla, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then he ends up losing to Mark Coleman, who was not in the best shape of his life at that point. So I think that, again, you got to put this in historical context. Just off of the eye test, this dude should have pummeled Mark Coleman, I
Right.
mean, but this is MMA, and the physique does not really matter all that much. It's what you can do in the ring, in the cage.
Yeah. Before we see the fight with Coleman, there is the scene where I saw Vanderlei. That was he walks by or something. He's right in the camera. Maybe he does a face off. I think. It was a face-off.
Yeah, it's a little quick one there. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
So, and then after Coleman wins, like you said, it was a grudge match, but he didn't look the best. Like I said, he was a little worried about his buddy. There was a lot going on with him. But so after he wins, we go to December 1999.
Right.
And this is Rehab. We're coming home. We're seeing the clip of Mark Kerr. He's walking with his bag. He's got his little shit walking behind him. He's doing a little kick with his feet, kicking a can and shit. Shit like that. But
Right.
he's coming home. Dawn is. This was actually a really. This is, again, I was still on the Dawn train here, and this is a true, real thing, and she's really open about her emotions, and I think whether it's real or not, she's good at articulating things that are real. Like she says this right here, she's worried about how if he's gonna love her after the drugs are gone. Like if you come home and this isn't what you want anymore, like that's genuinely something as somebody in a relationship you would be worried about. Like the whole time we were together, we had been one thing. In this scene, we also find out that Dawn is a fucking alcoholic, and she's now sober as well, but we find out that's a fucking lie. They both swore to each other that they're going to be sober, and this is where you're getting into the whole what? Go ahead.
No, see, because I was going to say, this is actually a note, though, is that no, she does not get clean. That's the whole thing, is that
Right,
but she even said, like, she doesn't make a promise to him, though. That this is why I think it's key to note, because yes, we get this odd juxtaposition here. It's like, yes, Dawn, up until this point, this very hard left turn here, Dawn is like doing no wrong right now. What if he doesn't love me when he's sober? That's you can feel that too. That's a very human thing to think about. And the fact that she's even thinking in that way, you're like, man, that's a good girl right there. I think you even had in the notes before this very hard left turn, Dawn is a good girl. But then right after that, Mark is off being sober, trying to get himself clean. Dawn's an all-day drinker who already did a stint in rehab herself, or in AA, she said.
Yeah.
And she's drinking around him while he's trying to get clean. And she says that. She says, like, I broke my promise to him when I said that I wasn't going to drink. I was going to stay, try to stay clean too. Breaking up is probably wise. Good on both of them for just breaking the fuck up at this point, because that's what they end up doing.
Yeah, Kerr is the one that they say is the one that breaks it off, which I was like, good for him. And then Dawn ends up leaving. We end up finding out later that's not as easy as it seems. You know, she left this time, and later we're gonna find out some crazier things about her ways to escape. But so after this, Kerr is back to MMA. He pulled out of the main event and lies about his symptoms to the commissions or whatever. This was, yeah, I'm trying to think. This was pretty important because he went back to MMA, but then he just didn't go to the, like, he just didn't perform in his main event, and he lied. I know I just said all that again, but like it was
he feigned an injury, is what he told everybody, that he was injured. This is going into the Pride Grand Prix 2000. This is a very big seminal Pride event here. This is like a Legends Row event. This is where you see Sakuraba, you see Hoist Gracie. This was like the legit who's who of MMA at the time. This would be the opening round. I think they did it in two nights. So it was an opening round night, which was 16 fighters all fighting on one card. And then the next event would be the second portion of the tournament, which was an 8-man single elimination tournament. So the winner would have to fight 3 times. Kerr and Coleman are both going to be in this tournament and could possibly end up facing each other. We'll find out. But yeah, before all of that, when Mark went off to rehab, he had just told everybody that he had gotten an injury, and now the organization's like, are we good here, man? Because you know, you pulled out, like, you know, we just want to make sure that like you're actually going to be doing this thing, because you screw up our tournament, like we take business pretty seriously out here, you know.
Yeah, 100%. This was, like I said, it was an interesting situation. But that's really all I have to say about that. He gets on the mic and he says like, I'm real sorry that I didn't participate, but I will make this up to the Japanese people or something like that.
Right.
And he actually doesn't in the documentary, I don't think, but so
not really. I mean, well, to an extent. I mean, I guess like he did try, because the next scene we're going into is Mark Kerr goes to LA to train with the GOAT Boss Rutan. We get a whole lot of footage of Mark and Boss training together, and that was a lot of fun. But so I mean, at least he was trying, because Boss even says, Boss praises Kerr for being like a wrestler who is actually trying to learn striking, trying to learn the other martial arts, mixing the martial arts, so to speak. So I mean, kind of funny. It's like the note that I had is, a wrestler trying to learn how to strike. How real it is that still needs to happen.
Right. This one was a funny scene when we get to see Boss, whatever it is.
Mhm.
We did a whole thing on this. Boss Rutan was really fun in these scenes. You get a part where Boss is talking about, he's like, I used to love this because I was so good at just smashing people, but then they started taking out all the best moves, and I'm like, dude, that is hilarious. Like,
These old school guys want to fucking do the dirtiest shit. They all loved this shit.
Yeah.
They all loved the dirtball shit that you used to be able to do in this sport. Yeah, Boss is like, not being able to knee a downed opponent. Come on, guys, what the hell?
Yeah, he was genuine, and it's funny because he's just like chilling. He's just like, yeah, man, it's ridiculous. They just like ruined everything. They nerfed me, like, and it's just really funny. So they showing Kerr working out with Boss. Boss is obviously working him over because he's a striker. He's like, I got a wrestler in front of me. I'll just cook him up all day.
Yeah, hard sparring.
Right, and then you get a scene where Mark Kerr jumps Gilly. And I had this thought of like, holy shit, imagine that dude's arms wrapped around your fucking neck, bro. Like, no fucking chance.
Hell
like,
yeah, dude. No, absolutely. So I mean, Mark is training for his fight in the Pride Grand Prix, which is going to be against another classic fighter of the era, Enson Inoue. Enson Inoue, who was 20-8 and fought at UFC 13. Just wanted to mention that. He's in the ring cutting a promo. I assume that's from when he was supposed to fight Mark. Excuse me.
I am glad that you brought this up, because that dude, you could tell that pro wrestling was a Japanese inspiration of that. Like, because he got the mic and he was like, "Ain't nobody over there gonna beat me."
Yeah,
it was perfect. So
you pull out of a fight and I'm kicking your ass, and then I'm kicking you out. You're getting out of here,
dude. That was dude. He knows what he's doing. So that dude's a great. Yeah, I loved it. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure, Enson Inoue was good on the mic. I'll definitely give him that. But so I would assume that that's from when Kerr pulled out. They just like let him have the mic at some point, because that was like an odd little insert that they did of that. But yeah, so this is the scene where I was talking about earlier that Pride sends the oversight committee to come down and check on their investment, Mark Kerr, just dropping in at the gym. You know, I was like, I kind of wonder if the UFC has little like spy reporter people that ever do that, you know, just go in and be like, yeah, is this guy training? You know, that kind of, I don't know. I probably not at this point because, you know, people take the sport so seriously and it's more of a, you know, business oriented kind of thing now. But yeah, I mean, back then, like, you know, if he didn't fight, they could potentially be losing money.
You would think somebody's watching Cedricus Dumas by now, but I can
Good
assure
point,
you
right?
that there's a monitor that tells you where he's at. It's not a person that the UFC hired, dude.
Yeah, really.
So
Yeah, that ankle monitor is not sending information back to the HQ out in Vegas. You know.
yeah, but
True.
either
Good
way,
point.
yeah, either way, yeah. No, this was great. We get it. Next, we get a montage of Mark Kerr training. He's going upstairs. There's a lot of fucking stairs that he's running up in this next scene. A good little montage. This is the post-drug era. This is a good time. It's always a good time. You always glow up when you're not on pharmaceutical drugs like this, and I 100% stand by that. Mark Kerr is living proof right here in the documentary, so shout out with him. He goes back to training with Boss. There was so much Boss rooting, and it was actually genuinely cool to see because I know him from Karate Combat, and he be on there, and he's just the old man now, you know. But like seeing him young, same with Mark Coleman. Seeing them young, I understand like, oh, they grew in the sport, and now they're old. They're decades beyond this. Like this is something that's like, this is what they made their career with. It's just like crazy to just think of it that way. Like it's just really cool to see Boss Rutan really young with his little soul patch. Like, you know, cool times, man.
Yeah. This is again, you know, that's why beyond the glimpse of what you get about the sport, again, the time capsule element of this is you know very interesting. But also there's one portion here that has always been a question that I have had ever since even watching this the first time years and years ago. At one point on commentary during this little montage that you were mentioning, I think it's Quadros who says Igor Vovchanchyn, who's also fighting in this Grand Prix again, Igor Vovchanchyn, the punching machine. And I was like, the punching machine, the smashing machine, how did that, like, did they both just have a similar nickname, or like did Mark get his nickname later, or like what, like why are they so close together? And that always just stuck out to me as just an odd thing, because you're watching a documentary called The Smashing Machine. They never call Mark Kerr the Smashing Machine in this documentary, by the way.
Right.
So
right.
But the one time that you hear anything like that, you hear it being applied to Igor Vovchanchyn. So just a strange thing to note that I've never really gotten a clear answer one way or another on why that is. But aside from that, in this montage, you see the crowds outside waiting to catch a glimpse of the fighters, and inside the arena with the pyro going. And it really gives you a feel of how awesome these Pride events were back in the day. These were spectacles.
Yeah, that was definitely key to note. So it's January 2000 now is the date, and Coleman and Kerr are outside. And I wanted to note that it seemed like it was a little hesitation on Kerr's side to go interact with the fans. Like he was standing back, and Coleman was like kind of waving him on, like, come on, dude, like let's, you know, we're here, like they're out there, you know, let's go see what's up. So they go start interacting with the fans. And it was a cool moment. You could definitely tell like Japan loves MMA. Like these people, who gives a shit? They were ready to, like, they were outside like Michael Jackson was performing in that goddamn arena. So shout out to them. And then we go back to you know, the warming up in the same room type of deal. Like all the fighters are just in a room together warming up, you know. So go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to make one quick point.
Yes.
This is more for you and me than for anybody else, but scenes like that are why I had such a problem with Taylor in the cage. Mm-hmm. Because you remember when he was walking into the arena and all these people are around, oh, Taylor, it's Taylor. Yeah. I'm like, these are the guys that get that, not some kid who had a viral knockout on you know, anyway. So like, just had to mention that more for you and I. That's a little inside baseball. But so anyway, but yes, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt that.
No, you're fine. There was so they're back warming up in the same room. I'm like, times are so different, you know. Then we're intersplicing clips of brutality. And then we got Kerr's now in a fight, I believe, after this.
This is the fight with Enson anyway that's starting up here, yeah.
So Kerr gets an instant takedown, gets up, gets another, starts smashing him. Just smash, brother, smash. Is just smashing him, and then destroys him until a decision. He doesn't actually finish him, I don't believe, which
Yeah,
is
no,
crazy.
wins by UD after just pummeling him on the ground. I said in the notes, he lives up to the Smashing Machine name when he's doing his work on the ground.
Yeah, me and Henry were talking about that. Like, this dude, genuinely, if people fought like this now, like, there would be a reason that people wouldn't be signing contracts, to fight them. And that is a problem that we do have in the sport now, is a lot of people don't want to risk something against a certain person. But like, this dude is scary. Like, and you could talk about Mr. Andreas Gustafsson. I mean, he throws elbows a little smashing similarities, but the ground and pound is obviously not what this guy has. Mark Kerr is insane for this win here. I said Kerr is also he's just so likable. Like, he's just such a likable guy. I can't remember what he was doing that made me. He might have just like said "good fight" or something to the dude.
It's just
after.
any time that he's talking. I mean, like Mark Kerr is the type of person that, like, if he's like, he would be a fantastic motivational speaker or something along those lines, like a guidance counselor. He's the type of person that, like, when he says something to you, like, you feel it. It's like, you feel the genuineness of everything that he says. Like, he just has such a demeanor about him that's like the most like endearing like it really is just like he's has just like this element to him that he's like insanely likable, like you said. It's just, you don't, it's hard to describe it, but it when you see it, and like you definitely feel that.
What's also great about him as well, and I'll bring it up now, is like he does have flaws, as most humans do, but he's not somebody that's flawed in the way it's like, oh well, he did murder his girlfriend, or nothing like that.
Right? No, of course, yeah.
So he's somebody you could root for even with his flaws. It's not like you're rooting for the dude like Cedricus Dumas, like
right,
shit like
yeah,
that.
100%, yeah, absolutely. Thank God for that too.
Right. So we get to the so Kerr's likable. I said The Rock definitely should be able to pull this off. Like, this is not a crazy performance that he needs to be doing. Like, just be a gentle giant kind of character. That's all you got to do in the movie, and I think he should nail it 100%. And the look is on key. So
I would say so as well. I mean, I actually have always thought The Rock is not a bad actor. Actually, just in general, I've seen him do a number of different, like when we were talking about Cyril Gahn, and I was saying how, like, I'd need to see him do like a variety of things to know if he's actually a good actor. Like, I have seen The Rock like do more dramatic things, and just like I've seen him do like straight comedy. I've seen him do like straight drama. Like, I've always thought he actually is a decent actor. So I actually have high hopes for him when it comes to this role. But that's that we can talk about that more.
So
later,
and then we're backstage. Dawn is still here.
Oh, before that though, I did want to say one thing. Sorry, yeah, because we're in this portion here. There, yet another thing on commentary. It's a little quick clip, but this is definitely Stephen Quattro saying the winner of the Pride tourney is going to get $200,000, and he says that's no chump change. And I'm like, you're getting $200,000 for fighting to get into the tournament one night, and then a month later fighting 3 times in one night against the best in the world. Even in the year 2000, you can see how little these guys are making for the amount of work that they have to put in for it. Like, now, 2000's money, maybe $500,000, maybe let's say it was 750,000, whatever, like that amount for 3 fights in one night against absolute killers who are the best in your sport. Like, this is, it shows you what these guys are going through in order to make that buck.
Yeah. So next scene, we get Dawn, and she's still here. She did not actually leave. They did not actually break up. And, that's how relationships sometimes go. When you've been around somebody so long, it's rhythms and routines. You can't go on without each other. You always got to gravitate back. So I think that's what exactly happened here. She's being insanely disruptive. Like, she's just being the biggest, nuisance. And Boss is actually keeping it so real here. And this was honestly one of the most refreshing things. He's sitting here saying, he's like, when you get home and you got somebody who just won't leave you alone, and you want to go to sleep and you can't get rest, then you're not going to perform the next day, or you're going to take days off, and that's not what you need to be doing at this at this point in your career, if you want to be great, you got to cut out the bullshit. And I think he even says, like, if you got to sleep here, go sleep here. Like, you get away from that toxicity. If you want to be something, you need to just da 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 da. And then I said maybe good he left, but like he walks out, I think is what he does, or something in the scene, because she wouldn't shut up, I think. But either way.
Yeah, this was probably the point where Dawn is like at the most unlikable, I would say. Maybe this and one other scene that sticks out to me, but like yeah, Dawn comes back and she says, "We've been trying to figure out where we're at with our relationship and where he's at emotionally and mentally." And my note to that was, where is your drinking at? Because
Yeah.
that was a big problem with all of this, if I recall. The fact that you could not give up drinking for a dude who's trying to get sober. And then it goes into what Boss was saying about if shit's bad at home, it's going to be bad for your fights and all of that.
Yes. So we get a scene in between the next scene. We get Mark Coleman at Ohio State. And
I said Chase is going to be happy to see that.
There we go. That one's more north again. So he's at Ohio State wrestling with some big name guy that I don't know, obviously, but I'm sure you know that wrestler, right?
I didn't know that one. I did not have the.
Henry knew him. I should have said his name. That's my bad. But
yeah, I didn't pick up on it. I think I had it to like go back and look at, and I just never did. My bad.
Either way, this scene is not very important because it only just ends up with them hard wrestling for a second. Coleman hurts his hand or something, and then he's like, "All right, I'm good." And then that scene ends. Like, I don't think there's really much to note on that wrestling scene at Ohio State. There's some, like I said, this is kind of like the pool one, where it just is a random scene that they had of somebody that was relevant to the story, and they just threw them in there.
Well, no. So the reason that they show that, or at least what it's bolstering, is that another point that I kind of skipped over. But when I had said about the 200 grand, they did make a mention there that because both Mark Kerr and Mark Coleman are in the tournament, there is potential for them to fight each other, and they're like, that's going to be a little bit awkward, but they were both like, hey, you got to do what you got to do here. We're both up for it. And then Mark Kerr had said that he thought that he was a little bit more athletic than Mark Coleman. And my feeling was that this was to show that, yeah, Mark Kerr was more athletic than Mark Coleman, because if you saw him wrestling here, like, he was not the greatest at this point. Like, he was okay, but
Okay. I do actually remember what you're talking about, and I do like the point that you make, but I also think this was just a scene to show is like, well, they're not going to train together for this anymore. Like, he's at Ohio State training with, he's got his own team that he's training with.
That would make sense too. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, I mean, because really this is the point in the story now, because of the Pride Grand Prix, where we're kind of almost diverging the two entities here. Kerr and Coleman sort of have to branch paths a little bit because potentially they could be fighting each other, even though they're friends.
And so after this, we go to April 2000, and Mark is still with Dawn, and this was 4 months later, so they're still going through their shit. And Dawn is acting like the weirdest woman ever. She's sitting outside with a steak knife on a lawn chair, just like twirling it, and like, Mark is just like cleaning the pool, like doing his own thing, and he walks by and just like takes the knife from her like she's a fucking child. Like, this scene was absolutely ridiculous.
So I think that you missed what started off this scene, and this is the other part where Dawn is at her most unlikable. But this is actually, to me, one of the best scenes in this film from a filmmaking standpoint, and I'll tell you why. So what we see here is the scene starts with Mark cutting branches off of a tree. That's where that knife came in. So Mark starts, he's there, the tree has like low branches, he's chopping those off. And then he hands the knife to Dawn. He gives her the blade, and she holds it for a moment. Then he goes to clean the pool. And yeah, she's kind of fiddling with it. She just sort of, kind of messes around with it a little bit. He comes back and he takes it from her. And then she flips him off behind his back as he walks away. This, to me, from a filmmaking standpoint, is kind of brilliant, because like, if you want to get poetic about it, this to me is Mark handing her the knife, like, here, I'm giving you the power. You can do what you want with this. Like, you can hurt me because, I'm giving you that authority kind of thing. He does end up taking it back, which I guess takes a little bit of that poetic interpretation away from it. But either way, even if you strip the poetic nature of it away, it's just a very human scene. Like that, like, because there's no dialogue or anything. There's no conversation between them that you hear. It's all silent. You're just watching these two people interact with each other, knowing everything that's going on in their relationship and seeing it unfold just kind of as it naturally would. So again, from a purely artistic standpoint, this is probably my favorite scene in the movie, because it also does really like play up how hurtful to his life Dawn is without having to say a single word.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. This was one of the weirder ones. I'm definitely not a fan of Dawn. She's a little crazy. This is after this scene, we get Mark Kerr talking about, well, he's shaving his head, and he's talking about how he's not really into the idea of going bald, but if he doesn't like it, his hair will only grow back stubble, and so he might be able to rough his opponent up a little bit, which me and Elite were talking about. They should do that more. That should be a more common thing. That would be really painful if you were in dude, imagine you got the RNC and he just starts rubbing the stubble on you. I mean, you might let go, man.
I don't dislike this, actually. I think I'm all for that. Yeah, just
Gamesmanship, man.
Yeah, a week or two beforehand, you get that real tiny, the really small micro hair growing in there, and it's kind of like a Brillo pad or something like that, some hard roughing agent there, like sandpaper. Right. Yeah, I'm with that. But then that is all true. Then we also see Mark Kerr drinking at this point,
yes,
which is a little bit interesting based on everything. And he says, he's like, a couple of beers, what's the big deal? And I'm like, buddy, it's kind of a big deal based on what you're going through.
Well, I mean, I agree. I mean, but listen, a beer and hard drugs, there's a big leap there, and I agree. She was being toxic, and yeah, it was probably an asshole move of him to just be like, man, this beer is real good, ain't it? Right next to her, like, sipping.
But she was drinking too. They show us a scene of her before that where she's got a cup of something. I don't know if it was alcohol, but
I did remember that. Yeah, I was like, look at her, she's got the fucking margarita already. Yeah.
So I mean, it's just like, my whole thing with that was, it's like, yeah, I do get it. There are levels to it, but like alcohol is pretty damaging and like can be like as addictive as any of those other things. And like the fact that she is an enabler, like it was kind of bad to see him doing that in my estimation. And I'm sure that it did not help anything.
I sided with Mark on this one right at the end here. I'm like, Mark just wants to have a brewski, and you just will not shut up. Like, I genuinely don't get why him having one or two, bro, it's a Tuesday night. Like, who cares? Whatever you want to say. But, and then the next scene, Mark is talking a little bit about an argument that they were having. And this is where it goes crazy, because he just throws this out there like it's nothing. He's talking about an argument of how one night she wouldn't leave, and he kept trying to get her to leave, so he ended up calling the police, and she grabs his gun, and then it gets crazier, and then razor blades to her arms, which was, that is intense. Like, imagine you are a human and you have to deal with that. Like, it is genuinely scary and traumatizing. I mean, I know, Mark Kerr, you've done a lot of your things in life and you've seen a lot of different things, but like, imagine somebody that you are, trying to work out a relationship with, and they're doing things like this. Like, that's absolutely craziness. But
yeah, I mean, that element of it, because we're only getting glimpses into this life through this documentary, it's like it really like hits you like a ton of bricks when he's saying it, because you've gone through all of this with him so far, all of these things that he's been going through personally. You've come to understand him a little bit as a person, and all of the things that we've been saying about how likable he is and all this, and then to think about this woman who up until very recently in this piece you kind of thought was just a cool, good person, like it turns out to be one of the bigger demons that he's battling in his life, essentially, because that's all correct. Cops come, she's grabbing guns. He says, like, in a very genuine way, as like almost as an aside, he's like, oh, thank God they weren't loaded. And I was like, yeah, Jesus, think about that. Think about how different everything could have been with this had those guns been loaded. So she's grabbing guns, she's cutting herself with razor blades. I said just in the notes, Dawn is a problem. Obviously the demons are still in his life.
Yeah, this one, This was a rough scene to get through, you know, but they kind of glanced over it pretty quick. And you know, this is where you're starting to notice that the runtime is running really short, and you're like, there's a lot more that I feel like I need to get unpacked here. Like, what's the resolution between, you know, Dawn and Mark, and we'll figure out here soon. But like, yeah, so they kind of get over this. Mark Kerr is fight ready. Coleman is getting an interview. And he's talking about how that this is just business. You know, we may be friends, but we both know that if money's on the line, we've always been ready to have to put each other in the middle of it, you know, kind of deal. So this was a good interview. Coleman is really, listen, underrated once again. I'll give him some props. Like, Mark Coleman really is somebody that I do genuinely respect as a pioneer, man. This dude's good.
And it's funny because, like, if this documentary was all about Mark Coleman, you would probably come away with a lot of the same feelings about how genuinely good a person he is. It's just interesting because the, like, juxtaposing it with Mark Kerr, who's like even more of a sweetheart, like it almost overshadows it. But yeah, you can't like understate it that like Mark Coleman is a great man and like a great dude in this, because in this scene, this was the one that you had referenced earlier too, where the Japanese reporter is kind of like politely grilling Coleman on fighting Kerr. He's like, or she's like, you know, well, yeah, you guys are friends. Like, what's that going to be like? Blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
Coleman is nice, but you can tell that the questions are kind of agitating him a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, let's not really go down this road, lady. Like, you know, let's keep it professional here. Cause you know, you're getting into territory that I don't think is appropriate.
Yeah. So, and then after this, we get the two fights between or not between them, but we get the two fights that they have individually. So Coleman's fight, Kerr is watching, and Coleman is just a savage in the fucking ring. Wins by decision. There was nothing else more to say, and then we get it right into Mark Kerr fighting. Unless there's anything you have to say about
the only thing I wanted to mention here was just that Coleman is fighting. This is the second round of the Grand Prix now. So Coleman is fighting Akira Shoji. And the only real note that I had from that fight was just that, like, there at one point you get these in this film in general, you get these really nice ringside shots, which probably you didn't often get a lot in this sport at that time. So kind of a cool look for people watching this to be able to see like that angle of it. But what you see is the bruising on the side of the torso of Shoji. And I was just like, no one did conditioning back then. You know what I mean? Like, there was no body conditioning. So like when you were in there, you were taking legitimate shots that your body was like not prepared for. And like just fucking this huge ass bruise just going down his side. But so that was Coleman's fight. And then Kerr is fighting Kazuyuki Fujita is who Kerr is fighting. Excuse
me. And he smashes him. He's smashing him, smashes him. He cooks him so hard. He gassed out though, and then gets fucking hammered. Golly, gets absolutely destroyed. Should have been a stop, but they didn't for some reason. It was literally like 3 minutes of unanswered strikes with him cowering kind of on his face, you know. So it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Fujita for being able to weather the storm from Kerr, because yeah, I mean, he was getting smashed up, and then he just ends up turning the tables. And Mark is you know, tired. He's taking shots on both sides of the head, just kind of kneeling there. There's just really another very like nice artistic shot. It was between the referee's legs, just like kind of peering in. I mean, yeah. You know, it's kind of like
you get the under the ref.
It was a little silly, but like I thought it was pretty like artistically framed based on what you're trying to get out of like the visual information.
I agree, but that's just really, it's like in the moment you're like, this would be sick, but then when you watch it back, you're like, why did I crouch under the ref? That is maybe a little interesting.
I thought it was a nice shot though, but but so yeah, I mean, this was at this point in the documentary, I thought a very well-paced delivery of visual information, the way they stretched those last moments of Kerr's fight, because it feels like Mark is being beaten up for an eternity by the time that the bell rings, and you see the disappointment in Boss's face, you know, when Mark eventually will lose to Fujita in this moment. So I mean, like, you're seeing now, as we talked about those branching paths, Coleman is on the upswing, Kerr has now lost, and you're just seeing the sucking of energy out of, you know, the life of that side when it comes to Kerr's, you know, part of this story here. Because, you know, it's, I think Coleman even says, it's like, you know, you change in this sport when you win, and you change in this sport when you lose. It's always better to change for the win. And I thought that was very, very well illustrated in the visual storytelling element of this.
I think what was interesting as well is once this fight is over, we go backstage and Boss is talking to Mark Kerr, and he's like, what can you do? You can't always win them all. And then he starts undressing. He's like, all right, well, I appreciate the fight that you have right there. I got to go do my other job and he's literally taking his shirt off and he's going to go commentate now. He's like, Mark, appreciate you. I know you're busted up. Dude, do your thing. Deuces. It's great.
This was the most G shit I have ever seen in my life. I just said in the notes, Boss is a G. Backstage attending to Mark post-fight, changes shirt, and is right back out on commentary with Quadros and Ken Shamrock. I was like, that is some dope shit right there. That is old school MMA at its fucking finest too, dude. Just pulling double duty and shit. That's why, brief little side note, but I think I can mention it here. This is why whenever anybody gives Laura Sanko shit, I always shut that shit down immediately, because Laura Sanko on the Contender Series was fucking interviewing fighters, running back over to announce, running back over to fucking commentate. Blah. She was every fucking where. So you leave Laura Sanko alone, because she put her work in just like Boss was doing back in the day.
Hell yeah. And then so I think after this, I don't know if I heard this correctly or what the situation was. I think I heard that the guy that Mark Kerr fought was injured and he was not going to be able to continue in the tournament.
No, Fujita was injured, because that was the whole thing, was that it was going to be Fujita against Coleman.
Gotcha.
So as far as I mean, I'm pretty sure that that's what it was. Because so after Kerr's, because that was the whole thing, is that Coleman won his fight and they were in the same round. So Fujita, the winner of Fujita and Kerr, was going to fight Coleman, and so
Gotcha.
Fujita ends up getting injured, and there was this is an iconic line. So yeah, Fujita can't make it to the next round, so it's Coleman versus Vovchenshin, and for the finals now, and he just says, it's yours to win, Coleman. I was like, Kerr, that's an iconic line right there. But so right, because it was Vovchenshin, and
you think that'll be in the movie, that line right there?
I hope so, man. I hope so. Yeah, absolutely. Because I like that. I thought it stands out to me anyway. That's like, it's.
Let's be real. Mm-hmm. If you're making a movie and you're a Hollywood producer, if you're making a movie and you're like, well, we have all the footage we need right here. We could just watch 2 hours and we can make a movie based on that. Like, I bet most of what we've seen in this probably is going to be what the movie is going to be. Like, because this is the only things that we have to go off of for him, kind of deal. So back in the day, there's not another movie made about him, and there's not, like, I don't know, whatever.
I mean, well, look, I mean, I would. You're calling your film The Smashing Machine. It's based on this documentary. This is your source material. Like, I would assume that a lot of these things are going to be in there. I'm going to be very interested to see if there are some of those elements that we've been talking about, like the family stuff, the stuff with Dawn that we don't see. Like, what additional supplemental elements are they going to play into this story? Like, what are they going to bring into it that we have not seen in this documentary, to flesh this out into more of a Hollywood film? Because based on what we see here, it's a very straightforward. The strength of this documentary is not in the narrative as much as it is in the heart of these individuals and the human elements. So how do you translate that into a Hollywood film that's going to have the same type of resonance narratively is I think what I'm going to be looking for in the movie.
I hear that. And then so after all that, Coleman is now in the championship, and we're getting spliced in between with Mark Kerr getting stitches while Coleman is winning the fight. He's killing this guy. He's absolutely having the performance of a lifetime. He's living up to the moment. Mark Coleman wins the championship. He is the Hammer, and I even said, like, maybe the documentary, it's called The Smashing Machine, but at the end of the day, maybe it was just about the tournament. Like, Mark Coleman was the Smashing Machine. He was the Smashing Machine for this documentary episode. I don't know.
No, I mean,
that I read it.
I think that I don't think that you're looking at this piece like as artistically as it's being presented sometimes here, because like I thought that this was like a beautiful juxtaposition of Coleman elated in victory after he's beaten Vovchenshin with all of those knees that you were talking about. He's just raining him down. Dude was definitely a beast in this moment for sure. But it's this juxtaposition of Coleman elated, the crowd's going crazy, and Mark Kerr just silently being stitched up in the back just this like this very quiet moment where they're just the doctors are just doing their thing, and outside Coleman is having the greatest moment. He even says that in the interview later on, where he's like, the birth of my daughters is the best day of my life, but like this has to be a close second. So one of the best days of his life versus the culmination of all of the troubles and hardships of Mark Kerr's life, culminating in this silent, quiet moment of him being stitched up in defeat. So that's why I do like, because I understand where you're coming from, where it's like this is like the Mark Coleman story as much as the Mark Kerr story, but those elements of it are why I think it still retains the Mark Kerr story more than anything else, is that you see all of the consequences of the life that he had lived up until this point. And that's even why it's more impactful, is because, like you had said, he's not a bad guy. He's not this dude is not he certainly is not hurting anybody besides himself most of the time, all of the time that we've seen him in this documentary. But he's done things to himself that cannot be undone, and he has people in his life that, or a person specifically in his life, that is, this is what you get out of that dynamic. And so I think that is why this is still like his story more than anything, because now he has to be the one to sit by and watch his best friend live out his dreams when they could have been his.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then this really just kind of abruptly ends. I know Mark Coleman wins the championship. That is the end of his story. But I felt like the story for Mark Kerr was totally left, for us to just assume. I even thought, like, I'm watching this documentary, I was unfortunately expecting that there was going to be like a loss of Mark Coleman's, something going on. Maybe he was gonna die. Like, I didn't know the dude was still living, by the way. So apparently he just doesn't care to make notice, doesn't come to UFC. Mark Coleman don't even talk about him. Bass Rutten, I've never even heard him talk about it. So it was just like abrupt that they just cut to 2 title cards after, and they say Mark and Don got married, and Mark has not fought since 2001, and that is it. That ends it. It's weird. It's
well, and so I mean, you're right. We kind of end this thing on a little bit of a downer note, I would say. I think intentionally, based on the way that this documentary is kind of portraying information, but you get that juxtaposition, like I was saying, of Coleman, winning, and then the downer note is, like you said, the text says that Mark and Dawn ended up getting married in 2001, and Mark stopped fighting at that point. And essentially we're left with the impression that Mark chose his demons over fighting a little bit, is what the documentary is sort of leading you to believe. So, I mean, again, from a filmmaking standpoint, I give this film a lot of credit, because from like, as a piece of art, I really do think that it is a very compelling presentation of this information. Now, documentaries in general have their own biases. The people who are making them portray information in a certain way that kind of leads the viewer in a direction. So whether or not the whole dynamics were as bad as they seem in this documentary, and what we're left with, going forward, were they as bad? That's kind of, I guess, for the viewer and the researcher in you to decide. So I did a little bit of post-film research here just for some context. So anything that I'm talking about now is not included in the film, but just some information, because like you said, Chase, Kerr is still alive, but we don't see him at UFC events. You see Mark Coleman all the time. I mean, right. I have a picture with him from when he was in Tampa. He's in Tampa. He's in Vegas. He's everywhere. He's always at the events. Kerr, for some reason, I guess, has just did not want that, or really sad to say, but what I had said a little bit earlier kind of is what I think may be more of what it is. I think that him leaving for Pride and then not wanting to come back and not having as big of a UFC career might be why the UFC did not have such favor for him for so long, because the UFC is all about loyalty. It's loyalty over everything. And Mark Coleman was the first champion of the organization, so there's a little bit more of a connective tissue there. But with Kerr, he fought, I think, in a few UFC events, and that was about it. He was really primarily Pride and surrounding organizations. So the information that I have about Kerr after the film is that Kerr would eventually return to fighting. He fought in 2004, and I believe he fought all the way up until 2009. After the documentary, he did not fare too well in fighting. However, he would fight 10 more times and would go 2-8 in that run. So,
Nice.
yeah, not great at all. Mark and Dawn had a son together, but they did eventually split again in 2015. Mark would go into sales, having worked as a Toyota salesman for a brief time. I don't know much more about his career after that portion there. And then the last thing that I had was that, he was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame preceding this film. And we talked about that a little bit on the podcast about the timing being, kind of advantageous, so to speak.
Especially because he wasn't even like in the UFC, like kind of
Yeah,
pride,
right. I mean, based on all of this, it's like he's in the pioneer wing. So I guess that there's, I think that there are a couple of fighters like Sakuraba is also in the pioneer wing, and so I think that they like open up that pioneer wing a little bit beyond just the UFC. So it does make sense, and I'm glad that he's in there for that reason. But the timing was a little bit like on the nose because the movie is coming out obviously. But so he did attend his induction ceremony for the Hall of Fame. There is a nice video of his speech from the induction, which I would recommend anybody watch. I believe it's on the UFC's official channel, but he makes a very nice speech there and has been sober now for 7 years. So congratulations to him for that. And
yes, congratulations for 7 years, but with our assumption that he decided to choose his demons over the sport, 7 years for, from the Hall of Fame thing. I mean, 2002 was when this came out. I mean,
right.
They're talking late 90s is when he was still doing whatever,
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, so there was an extended period of time, perhaps up until 2015 when, around 2015 when he finally eventually split from Dawn. And, I don't want to speculate too much about their relationship outside of what we know in the movie, but based on what we do know, perhaps for the better that they are not together anymore. So
for the better of the children as well.
Absolutely. For everybody involved, I mean, get away from toxic people is always my advice to anyone. Sober for those 7 years. And the very last note that I had was when you listen to him speak, even now, he is still that exact same guy. You always hear the heart of Mark Kerr every time that he talks.
That is really good to hear. Yeah, I was going to ask about that. If he still sounds like he still loves and articulates MMA the way that he once did. People like Conor McGregor at one time did the same thing, but then they eventually throw it all away because they fall to the demons too, man. And in this sport, it happens. It happens with a lot of different people in a lot of walks of life. But in this sport, genuinely, you can watch a documentary about one of the most prestigious, I guess, at the time, mixed martial artists, and then by the end of it, he ends up just being a car salesman. So
yeah, and how often do we hear that same story now? I mean, like this is the fight game is a cruel mistress in a lot of ways to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons and in a lot of different iterations. So it just is what it is. I'm very happy that he was able to be immortalized in this film for all of the reasons that we're talking about, because like you said, I mean, as a one of the marquee names of the sport of the time, a time that was way less documented than now, how many of the greats don't get that kind of treatment? How many of the greats don't have this type of presentation and thus don't have the same level of reverence that we are now paying to Mark Kerr,
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. This documentary was definitely solid. I enjoyed watching it. And I don't know, man, like I learned a lot about the early pioneers of the sport, especially these big two right here. And it was really fun to go ahead and review, not gonna lie, man.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I guess then before we go into like all of the the rankings and ratings kind of thing, as a newer fan, what impressions did you get of the era of the sport? Because I mean, like I think you said that you've probably seen I think you were on stream watching a little bit of Pride at one point recently,
Yes,
right?
I did watch the Pride event. Mark Coleman was in that one. Yeah,
sure. Yeah. So I mean, like if other than that, that probably is like the entirety of your exposure to Pride in that era. So I mean, what were your impressions then of like what it was like?
I mean, it was it wasn't underground, but it's what I would assume the underground vibes would be. But obviously on the grandest scale. Like this isn't true to life underground fight clubs, but like when it comes to the fight clubs, this is the above ground one right here. And like it really is just a special time to see what these people were willing to step in the cage and try to do to each other. Like it, and when you get people like Mark Kerr, like I think back and I'm like, oh, well, these were just fucking caveman brain people that were ready to just go murder each other. But like Mark Kerr genuinely wasn't that. Like,
Right.
and never judge a book by its cover, of course. You always got to get the finer details. And when you watch things like this, you'll realize that like people from all walks of life, they get into mixed martial arts and they end up, loving it and they're able to express that in a way to other people. And it's just awesome to see, man.
This is always that point right there is always why whenever I hear people say things like, why don't we just judge the fighters on their fighting, why do we have to know about them as people, like why do we consider that kind of thing?
Right.
It's because if you don't consider them as the human being, you miss out on people like Mark Kerr. You miss out on people like Rich Franklin. The genuinely good people of this sport deserve to be heralded as good people and good ambassadors for this very otherwise violent, bloody presentation. What people used to think about, what Eddie Goldman was talking about,
Right.
where it's, so yeah, people going out and trying to kill each other. It's like the
Human cockfighting.
exactly, like that element of it is lost if you don't know the human beings of this sport. And I'm very grateful that this film exists to present Mark Kerr in that way, and to give him that platform for the betterment of the sport and him, and posterity and the future generations to be able to know that.
Yeah, 100%. I think the last thing that I'll note, and it's just really on the human cockfighting aspect, is like, when has anybody ever seen a rooster shoot a double leg? And I just would genuinely love to see this because I don't believe it. But
Clucker's going in for the rear naked.
Yeah, like Jesus Christ, you guys obviously have never seen humans fight. I don't think they look anything like chickens, but whatever. That's whatever.
So, all of that being said, then Chase, what would you rate the Smashing Machine?
Am I rating this as like, are we gonna have like our documentary ratings? Like, is this gonna set the standard for our documentaries going forward, or am I just reviewing this as like, it's like content? It's just like a 6 out of 10, something like that. No, it was very good watch. It was very good. It kept me entertained. Documentaries, even something that's not a docu-series as well. That's the key to note. This isn't something that's like tailor-made for your attention span to keep you engaged in an episode and then get you to the next part. This is just a documentary, a blip in time. You're getting information about somebody that you didn't know before. Like I said, it's like an Odd Jobs type of thing. I think this was 7-8 out of 10 range for sure.
Right on. Fair enough. The way that I review anything that we do in this MMA on film series that you and I are doing, I review it as a film, and no outside elements of it.
So the pool scene definitely is taking points down.
Yeah, I was gonna say this as a piece of art, as a documentary film, art piece. I would give this a 9 out of 10 personally for me. It is because of this, and I think this is kind of an interesting element of where you and I diverge on this, because like you saw that I was kind of noting some of like those more artistic elements, and I don't know if you necessarily like picked up on them as much or like internalized them as much or whatever, but like those things are why I give it that, is because for what a documentary is supposed to do, taking this subject and dropping you into the world of this thing for the period of time that you are with it, and then also presenting information in an artistic manner that heightens the viewing experience. I think it does all of those things insanely well. I really, really do. And then also, if you want to add in a little bit of the cultural elements of it too, personally, I think that it's a very important piece of film as far as MMA goes. So maybe I'm breaking my own rules in doing that, but yeah, I would say it's at least an 8.5, if not a 9.
I think insanely good for what it was doing is a stretch in my opinion. I thought at the beginning, I thought it was doing well by giving us, the narration from Mark later on after he's been doing all this stuff, and it sets the tone, and then you get into him at the doctors and he's explaining. I thought there was a lot of scenes that molded well being back to back to each other, but there was a lot of points where we would just like, okay, so the scene where Dawn is being disruptive and still being, a total B word, and then we get to Coleman at Ohio State, and then we go back to Dawn, being like, I just thought like, why'd you have to throw the Coleman thing in there? I get it probably happened chronologically, but you didn't give us a timeline for that anyway. You could have just said it happened. You could have just thrown it in there at any point, after the whole. I just thought the story beats could have been better. And then with the pool scene, I think there was scenes that they just had, and they were like, "This will be really good, like filler." But I think it kind of diverged from.
I mean, I think I think the pool scene is really the only one that does that personally for me, because
the family scene. I mean,
the family scene I think is insanely important though, because I mean, like that's what's setting up why. Like, it almost reminds me a little of like Fargo in that way, where it's like, there's a lot of stuff that you don't get in that story, and like as far as backstory goes, you really only get like this piece of this story, and there's a lot of unknown elements to it that are like, why is this like this? It's very like there are more questions than answers, but it enhances what you do get because of that.
I thought the shots, like him coming home from rehab, I thought that was a really good one. Like you could really feel the vibes, like he's slowly making his way back home, kind of deal. Like I thought that was very good, but I didn't see anything that was overly standing out as like, man, this is a cinematic masterpiece. The dude that made this has artwork in a museum, whatever it was. So.
Fair. I mean, look, and maybe I will grant that perhaps I am maybe reading in a little bit more into like the artistic elements. Perhaps
if you said
like,
8, I'd be okay with it, but 9, insanely good. I think recency bias, because this is the first and only documentary we've seen that we've had to give a review on the spot for. But
I mean, if you want to chalk it up to that, then go ahead. But I'm sticking with it. I very, very genuinely enjoy this. I think that it is a high quality piece of art. I really do. Like, I mean, that's what I was saying about like the scene with the knife, like things like that. There's like what I would say if I wanted to reel it back a little bit is that there probably could have been more scenes like that throughout the piece that might have lent itself a little bit more to how I feel about the ones that are there, but the ones that are there are good enough for me. And like I said, I feel like at the end of it, you get a really solid conclusion without getting a solid conclusion. And that I thought was very impressive as well.
I think the scene that you're talking about, I find it so interesting, is because what does it say? Like, the best forms of art imitate life, something like that, if that's a quote. I think you just really appreciate that, like, humans can communicate. Like, I know that they weren't necessarily saying anything, but like the vibes, you were picking up on the vibes, and you're like, man, that was a great shot, and he really had that. And it's like, well, that was just two humans in the moment, that there's no soundtrack needed for something like that. There's no words that need to be said. There's no script. I mean, that's just, I don't know. I think you're more appreciative of the characters in this show here. I think that's what it was.
No, I mean, you can interpret it that way, but I mean, I think that why include something like that if you didn't see that in it, I mean, because you have all this footage. I mean, I would assume that there's a bunch of stuff that was not included.
It was, I think, when you're looking at the footage and you're like, oh, well, we got to have the one where she's fucking with the knife, right? Like, she looked crazy, right? Like, they knew for a fact, like, that was it right there. There was probably plenty more of them. I mean, listen, when it comes to the calling the police thing and the razor blades, like, it was kind of a casual call for him. Like, that probably wasn't like the extent of what all was happening. But even in that scene, I do agree with you. Yeah, they probably used it purposefully, that scene specifically. But I think, I don't know, I think that's just human nature more than just like, man, the director really set us up for a good scene there.
Well, great art lends itself to these types of conversations, exactly. So I think you're proving my point just by disagreeing with me. You know what I mean?
Hey, it's all right. We'll say, I think the Smashing Machine movie is going to be a movie that not many people are going to go see. I think the days of The Rock being a blockbuster sellout are a little beyond us. I don't think he's gonna go ahead and sell out as many movie theaters as
Well,
people are thinking.
before we get into the, because I do want to talk about
Okay,
all of
okay.
this stuff, but before we do, then let's just finish up what the always the ending of these things. So would you recommend the Smashing Machine?
I would yeah, I 100% would tell people if they are into the sport of MMA, this is an insanely good iteration. It'll show you what the early sport is like, and I think this is really good. Yes,
Yeah,
100%
and
recommend.
I mean, I think it goes without saying for me. I would class this as possibly the most important piece of MMA media ever made at current. In my opinion, I really do. I stand by that. I think that for what it did for this sport, even if it didn't feel like in the moment that it was doing it, like it's such an important piece of the history of this sport, which is notoriously poorly documented at that time. And aside from the actual fights, there's not much about the culture of the sport from that time. And then from the artistic sides that I was just outlining, I do think that there is a great deal of value in it, aside from just for the MMA aspects of it. So yes, absolutely recommend. So getting that out of the way, talking about the feature film, the adaptation that is coming out with The Rock. You're saying that you don't think that The Rock is a big draw anymore. Yes and no, whatever. Like, that aspect doesn't really play too much into it. And the reason that to me it doesn't is because this is not The Rock in the Fast and the Furious franchise. This is The Rock in a serious, dramatic role. So either way, it was already going to be playing to a different audience and not going for the same vibes and audience that they're trying to attract normally with The Rock.
Mm-hmm.
So that aspect of it, I definitely think is it's probably not going to be a breakthrough smash. What I would compare it to potentially, and obviously we have to see it to know for sure, but what I think it might end up being similar to is the Iron Claw, which was the film about the Von Erich brothers. Did you end up seeing that?
I did not end up seeing it.
I would recommend you see that. It is a very quality film, and I'm hoping that if this film is anything similar to it, at least in tone, then we will end up with a pretty quality work. And allowing The Rock to spread his wings dramatically in this type of role, I think is going to be very it's going to be effective. I do, because like I said, I don't think The Rock is a bad actor. I think he actually is fairly talented in his acting range. And playing this type of part is something that he will be able to sink his teeth into pretty effectively.
Yeah, I think the Smashing Machine, other than it not selling as much as I think it will, you're probably right. It's going to be a different audience that's looking into it, but I don't believe that it's going to be, I mean, it's not going to be a world-changing performance. We can already tell you guys that. I mean, The Rock is going to put on the best that he can do is most likely just getting people to care. Like, it's not gonna, and nobody's gonna walk out of that and tell everybody that Dwayne The Rock Johnson needs an Oscar. But I think if at most it's a good performance, and it's not, I think there needs to be a good deal of fun element to it, like to keep me engaged with the movie that's about mixed martial arts. I can't watch dramatized versions of what I just watched on here. Like, there's got to be, you're going to have to make the matchups, like the fight scenes, make those fun. Because if it's all dreary about him just like gassing out and dying in the cage, and then, whatever you want to say, that movie's probably going to be a downer. But
well, I mean, that, again, bringing it back to the Iron Claw, watch that and let me know what you think of it.
Because, I know about the Von Erichs. I know.
But just the way, based on what you're saying, though, the presentation in that film is definitely downer. So yeah, I think that there is potential for it to be that kind of film for sure. To be a kind of a dour sort of, a very heartfelt but very sad, essentially, film. Pulling on your heartstrings kind of thing. That being said, you're saying that, like, you don't think that The Rock is going to have to do all of that much, and that it's not going to be an Oscar-worthy thing. But didn't Zac Efron get a lot of praise for his work in that movie? No.
I didn't say that he won't have to do it. He surely could if he want. I mean, not if he wanted to. I just don't think he's going to do that. I don't think you're going to watch this movie and leave thinking Dwayne The Rock Johnson is like the greatest actor of all time. He's going to put on a performance that's standard. It's just really up to the storytelling and the world building like what is actually going to happen in this movie. Is The Rock going to be able to pull off the emotions that they're looking for in the scenes? Like, are we going to have like super dramatic where he's like in a hospital bed crying to his friends? Is that it, like, if you really want, like, the director probably knows the limitations that The Rock has in his acting skills. Like, why would I throw a guy who maybe isn't the best at crying on screen to a scene that he's going to have to cry? I don't know. Maybe there's a lot going into it.
But that's what I think. That's what I'm saying, though, is that I know that I have seen The Rock in more dramatic things where he is capable of doing that, though. So I think that I don't know if you're giving enough credit to the range that he has, because I do think that he has that ability to make that convincing and to get himself into that mindset.
I've seen movies like Walking Tall. What's the other one where he plays the nanny kind of deal? I forget what that one's called, but he was decent in that one.
The Tooth Fairy.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, he was
All
decent
right.
in that. But other than that, I mean, like it's nothing that's gonna make you think. Like, he's just the pro wrestler that became an actor. Like, everybody is just never gonna. I don't know. You said you liked him, but
I think you're underselling him a little bit here. I'm struggling to think of the exact film. I'll put it in the Discord or something. I'd have to go back through his filmography and pick out the ones where like this is exemplified here. But I know I have seen him do like work that I'm like, he actually has range. Like, he is actually an actor. So
I liked him in Jumanji, but he just played himself.
that's the thing. You're seeing all of his like Fast and the Furious popcorny family movies.
No, I stay away from things like Rampage or Skyscraper or all those other ones. Jumanji, whatever, it was a remake and it was cool. I liked it. But anyway, the Walking Tall was a very good serious one. There was another one that he did that was similar to Walking Tall, but it doesn't matter. I don't think. You may say that the range is there. I'm gonna have to be proven wrong to see if Dwayne The Rock Johnson is gonna shed a tear in this movie, kind of deal. But looking the part, he has no problem doing. I think that is the part that already sold me. Like, I'm sold enough that he looks exactly like what I just saw the real person. So that gives me hope that they did 5 seconds of research and found a Google picture. So.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, I'm only speculating as you are as to what he's going to be like in this film. So obviously, when we watch this movie, we will find out. But yeah, the look is certainly there, and obviously, we've just gone through potentially what the story is. So the story is there to an extent. What they're going to do with it, as far as fleshing it out into a narrative, an adaptation that is satisfying from a filmmaking standpoint outside of the documentary confines, that's going to be the interesting question here. And of course, we're going to come back, and once this film comes out, we will do another one of these and give you all of our opinions about that in depth, the same way that we have done here. So this is a good primer for what we will be seeing in that film, hopefully. And that comes out, I believe, in October. So keep your eyes on the channel, and we'll be back for that.
Heck yeah, it'll definitely be a good one. I'm excited to go ahead and watch that when it comes out. So just be ready for it.
Absolutely. So for right now, that's all we got on the Smashing Machine 2002 documentary. We appreciate you guys watching, and we will see you in the next installment of MMA on Film. Take care.